News Weekly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Batman News Weekly. This is episode 196 in a year 4, and this podcast is going to be a little weird, ladies and gentlemen. So, as we're recording, it is Tuesday. We usually record on Thursdays, but we saw The Flash last night, way later than we thought we were going to watch it. And so we're recording our review for that right now. The problem is James Gunn just dropped a podcast with Michael Rosenbaum, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about in that. But if you watch The Flash, it kind of gets really confusing. So what's going to happen in this podcast is we have a big comic topic to talk about. We're going to start this podcast with that. Then we're going to do viewer questions. Then we're going to do the Flash review. We will say spoiler warning starting right now, so you can listen up to that point. And then after that is going to be, we're going to talk about the James Gunn podcast.
Interview, yeah.
Yes, because we can't talk about the James Gunn podcast interview without spoiling stuff in the Flash to try to make sense of his words.
Yes.
So expect that. Go watch the Flash this weekend, unless you don't give a fuck about spoilers. If you're one of those people, listen to the whole fucking podcast.
And and I will say, you can go watch the interview with James Gunn without being spoiled for the Flash. It's just us now knowing information from the Flash movie, breaking down his words on what he was talking about in that interview is what's going to be spoilery. So if you want to go watch or listen to the interview on the Inside of You podcast with James Gunn, go listen to that, and then you can listen to us and our thoughts on it.
Yes. And so, yeah, this is being recorded on the 13th of June. So if something big happens later today, it's not going to be in this podcast or on Wednesday or even Thursday. So just FYI, if it's really big, we'll cover it on the next podcast. But we figured we have 3 big, juicy topics to talk about, and this is good enough for the podcast. So we're going to start with one of the biggest things that I didn't expect us to talk about. We've kind of just talked about this on the podcast randomly. Is it seems, Clay, that long-form storytelling is dead in Marvel and DC, according to somebody, I think a writer we both enjoy, somebody in the industry by Tim Seeley. Now, I believe this happened on the last 48 hours have been kind of crazy when it comes to news, because this happened on March 11th, which was Sunday. I, on a whim, saw Tim Seeley post something on Twitter, and I saw somebody comment Tim Seeley. And I don't really try to get into conversations on Twitter anymore. I try to stay away from it, but there's that little juice inside of me that still wants to interact and have conversations. So I took some bait, because Seeley was talking about, I don't know if you want to explain the hashtag that's going around that started this.
Yes, so there is a hashtag on Twitter currently going on right now that is trending very much, called hashtag comics broke me. And what this hashtag is meant for is a way for people that work in the industry to talk about the abuse that they have endured during their time working for comics. Whether it be artists being manipulated, whether it be writers being abused by editors, whether it be editors abused by publishers, writers or letterers and colorists, like all around, people are sharing their stories. Now, some others have decided, hey, I'm not going to talk about my personal thing, but I will share the hashtag to make awareness, because they are a little bit bigger. I know one stands out, Dan Slott, really big writer for Marvel, specifically Spider-Man. He has had some individual interactions on Twitter, like almost daily, where people tell him to kill himself, and so he's just like, I'm not gonna interact with this because I know it's just gonna end very negatively on my end. So he's being smart about it and pushing and elevating other people's stories. But it's a big problem throughout the industry. We've known that writers are underpaid. When we first started this podcast, there was a huge wave of firings at DC, and a whole lot of people left. Editors left, writers left, all sorts of stuff. and it's very much the same kind of way that Hollywood is doing things. They're not paying their writers very well. It's just like it's very odd to think like, how can you still have stories without writers, right?
Yeah.
It's wild. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I wonder if like comic writers could get into the Screenwriters Guild or something like that, or make something along those lines to make that kind of shit work. Or if DC and Marvel would be like, no, we're shutting down. Fuck it. Not worth it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Very interesting stuff. But yeah, so just a little bit of context, because I didn't know all of that information when I jumped into this conversation. So there are going to be some moments in this conversation that might make Tim Seeley's point of view a little bit more interesting, because I didn't know of that. I was just having a conversation. I didn't even technically, I mean, Twitter, you respond to anybody that's tagged in the post, right? I was responding to somebody that had made a comment to Tim Seeley, and Seeley jumped into the conversation or was tagged in it. So he says, Tim Seeley says, I will say the worst moment of comics broke me I've had when I received a glancing blow of a creepy fan ire after collaborating with a female writer. Weeks and weeks of review bombs, threats, emails. I felt terrible having brought her into that mess. So essentially, he worked with a female writer, and she was the one that got like all the shit talked to her, essentially, or like everything came her way. I really hate review bombing. That's really fucking stupid and shit like that. Yeah. But you know, it happens. We know this thing. So somebody responded to Seeley with this: entitled fans, antagonistic creators, and the unrealistic demands / expectations of both are standing in the way of comics having a resurgence in the media / entertainment zeitgeist. To be clear, Tim, you are neither and an example of someone who loves what they do. Now, I kind of had a problem with that, because I don't like the idea of people thinking that it's only haters that are the reason why comics are doing bad, right? Because we know, and you know from working at a comic shop, haters still buy comics. They just bitch about them.
Yeah.
All the time. So I responded with, I disagree. There are reasons comics haven't had a resurgence. Haters still buy comics, which is ironic. Comics are just confusing to get into, and with the rise of manga in the States, comics need to change their approach or accept living in stagnant water. Now, this one person did also comment to me again saying, like, comics have long runs, and also if people can get into something like One Piece or Dragon Ball Z, then readers shouldn't have a problem getting into comics, right? I commented with that, saying that it wasn't really a fair comparison. I was like, with manga, you just pick up book number 1 and you know where to start. In comics, anything Tim writes can easily be erased by the next writer. Just look at every Batman writer after Tom King. They've basically retconned everything he did. This is when Tim jumps into the conversation, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's exactly because you need a fresh place to start to sell to readers that this happens. So basically saying the reason why everybody gets retconned or whatever is because you need a new starting point.
Yeah.
Essentially. Then he goes on to say, if you reference something from 40 issues ago, which I do all the time, you're setting yourself up for reader disconnect. To which I responded, and this might be a little out of line. I don't know if I responded to this directly after that or what. It gets really weird because Tim also responds randomly. But in the connected sentence here, I say, it seems like a lose-lose in my opinion. Feels like you're taking a risk to try to get new readers, but could lose your current ones. I think Dan Waters, Azrael, and Colin Kelly / Jackson Langsey, Batman Beyond Nero Year, have the perfect blueprint for comics at the moment. And this is just because I've praised their writing before. I think they're doing really good in 4 to 6 issues.
I was going to say the format that we have suggested that needs to be taken precedent at DC and Marvel is, instead of, you could still have long form storytelling, but in small compacted stories, a la the Batman Neo Year, because again, we're getting a connecting story to that via this year. And we're also, I don't know if they have announced anything for a sequel to the Azrael story.
Yeah.
But either way, those were contained stories that had a beginning, it had an ending. You can look back at Azrael's past and still reference something 40 issues ago, or
Yeah.
look back at that to know who that character is. And same thing with Batman Beyond. But it's the format of 1 to 8 issues.
Yeah.
1 to 6 issues. The mini series, not necessarily the maxi series. The maxi series can work. It's just a little bit lengthier, you know. But you got it on the nose. We have been saying this is the correct format because it is helping people just get that serotonin for that small amount of time that everybody is searching for, a la TikTok, a la YouTube Shorts, you know, Instagram Reels. It's the people that want to get the quick swipe and get their serotonin, swipe again. And that's how these people are going to start eventually getting to that, you know?
Yeah. And he responds to that with, cool, I hope it works. Now, I read that as that was a little passive aggressive, but, and Clay read it too, and he kind of, I think you agreed.
Yeah.
It seems that way. But I have always said I don't like text-based conversations because I feel like people read them the way they want to be read, right? And maybe I am just projecting that it's passive aggressive. But I think a lot of people would say that's probably how people use passive aggressiveness in text. But to be fair to Tim, I'm not going to say that that's what that was. It's just how it seemed. I also didn't know about the hashtag. So if this hashtag was talking about how shitty it is to work in comics, and then I'm a guy over here being like, oh, I think these other writers have a better blueprint, maybe he took some offense to it. So I just
a little bit.
Yeah. So I just didn't think, because I kind of think like, oh, maybe it's like creators and YouTube, right? A lot of creators try to be like, oh yeah, we're friends. We try to like help each other. We try to do that. Granted, it's gotten a little crazy because now you got like egotistical ones now. But at the start of YouTube, everybody was kind of like, yo, everybody doing good makes it better for the industry, right? And maybe comics isn't like that anymore. I would think that everybody would be pretty supportive. It seems like that in a lot of comic circles. I don't know, but I don't know Seeley. I don't know who he likes or doesn't like. I'm not going to assume anything here, but I just did think that was like a little weird. But maybe I offended him, and I will take that. I will take that, you know, on the nose, whatever. But he goes on to say, well, and this isn't a response to the manga thing. I don't know if he just didn't connect the comments or what happened here. But he's like, well, manga is cheap because the creators were already paid and underwritten by the Japanese government in the form of free healthcare. Here, the consumer helps pay the bills. So essentially, Tim is saying that the reason why, and I kind of disagree with this to a point, because Tim is saying that the reason why manga is so cheap is because, well, they get free healthcare, so they don't have to worry about paying for healthcare. And the government, I don't know everything about the Japanese government, so I'm not going to say that I know everything. But it seems like he's like, well, they get free healthcare, so they can make everything cheaper. Where we don't get free healthcare, so it's got to be more expensive.
Yeah,
and that has nothing to do with why consumers would buy something, in my opinion, because in all honesty, comics are cheaper than manga. So, you know, there's his point doesn't really matter there. I understand where he's saying that like comic creators need to maybe charge more like for their services because they don't get free healthcare. You know what I mean? I do kind of feel like though that if America got free healthcare tomorrow, I don't think comic artists or writers change their prices, in my opinion. So,
wait, say that again.
So let's just say tomorrow, fucking President Biden's like, healthcare for all. Everybody gets it no matter what, right? Everybody's got fucking free healthcare. Doesn't matter. You can go get checked if you're sick. I don't think comic creators or artists right now would change their prices, because it seems like Seeley is saying that the reason why manga writers and artists are able to work for cheaper is because they have things taken care of, is what I'm getting told. I don't think just because you get free healthcare that these artists and writers in America would change their prices. I don't think that's the case.
I don't necessarily think it would happen immediately. I think there would be a change eventually. But it would be a slow change. I don't think it would be immediate at all.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, because usually you get healthcare through your employer, right? Which kind of blows my mind that DC and Marvel don't do that. Kind of fucked, in my opinion. But it is what it is, unfortunately, and that's why they do what they do. So yeah, and so the conversation continues to the point where like the other person that was in this conversation talks about reboots. Tim Seeley goes after manga again and says manga reboots constantly though. Some series do maintain one long continuity. It's unclear to me, but most publishers are to which what most publishers consider more value. Like what has more value, the long run
Yeah.
or the short run, right? I don't know about you, Clay. I haven't seen manga reboot as much as comic books.
No, and I don't necessarily think he means individual mangas.
Uh-huh.
Um, I am uh, a subscriber of two different manga apps.
Mm-hmm.
One is and two of them are free. So if anybody is familiar with, of course, Shonen Jump,
Yeah.
there is that has its own subscription. Viz Media just recently started their own subscription service also, which is a partnership of Shonen Jump. So I think you can get both, and it would be fairly cheap. I think there is also one called Azuki. Then there is K Manga, and then there is a Manga Plus app. There are new books, new series coming out almost bi-weekly, and they're in droves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing, and I think that's what he means, that there's constantly new stuff coming out,
Yeah.
kind of in the same light of DC and Marvel. There's new things coming to these characters and new stories coming to these characters,
Mm-hmm.
because as we were talking about earlier off air, is the fact that these, and I think even Seeley says it in this thread, that writers are having to keep up with trends. They're having to keep up with the new hype
Yeah.
and trying to bring new readers on board. It's the same thing that mangakas are doing with manga.
Yeah.
And the only difference is Marvel and DC will let these writers and artists go on for 15, 20, 30 issues before they eventually say, yeah, I think this has been a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not make any more. Whereas with all of these mangas, especially with Shonen Jump, I'm pretty sure they have to sign contractually that if it doesn't get the numbers that it needs by like chapter 4 or 5, it's
Mm-hmm.
cut.
Yeah.
Like you push maybe the next 4 issues after that,
Mm-hmm.
or the next 4 chapters after that, but then it's canceled.
Yeah.
Like it's very cutthroat. It's like, hey, this isn't doing well, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's the difference of it.
Yeah.
Like we have a what I feel like flooded market of DC and Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
where, and there's a story for everybody. I'm not going to say, oh, there's a whole bunch of shit out there that nobody reads. No, there's stories out there that I'm sure people absolutely adore. It's just not for me. It may not
Yeah.
even be for the majority of readers, but there's some people who are reading it, but it's not making profit.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that DC and Marvel really need to kind of cut.
Mm-hmm.
Like when looking at the numbers of like, okay, whose characters are more popular, what's doing this, I think they've already started to do some of the like digital, they were doing it during COVID, the digital first stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they're even before COVID, during the midst of the New 52, when their app had just started, Injustice and Batman Beyond were digital only via digital first comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they need to go back to that,
Yeah.
to look at, okay, if there isn't a huge readership, but still people want to read, maybe they would consider subscribing for this much to still read that character,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's another thing that manga is doing differently from DC or Marvel. They have a subscription service for majority of their stuff, and then their printed stuff comes out like months later.
Yeah.
Not a week later, not like 1 month later. Like freaking they're on, I don't even remember what chapter from My Hero Academia,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm pretty sure like when looking at printed versus digital, they're like 50 issues ahead
Yeah.
or chapters ahead of the printed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to compare the two. But as you have said, as we have said on this podcast, there's things that American comics can learn from mangakas and
Yeah.
from the publishers of manga, Shonen Jump, and all of them, that I think they really need to consider moving forward in the future.
Yes, yes. And I just to clarify this, we haven't even got to the point we're trying to get to yet. There's a lot of focus on manga that was coming from Seeley, but this is the big thing that came out of this conversation for me. This other person that was in the conversation says, this was in a response to me talking about Tom King getting all his stuff retconned. The guy says, yes, if I'm reading Tom King, then do I always have to buy whoever is on the other Bat titles to have the whole story? Maybe self-contained arcs per team are the answer. Then if someone wants to spin off from an arc, let them be known beforehand. And he's just kind of trying to come up with a way to just do comics differently, right? That's kind of what this whole conversation was. Tim Seeley comes in and drops a bomb here and says, I'll be honest with you, that kind of big two superhero comic is done. It doesn't sell. It's hard to market. They need to hype able creators, new takes, and fast turnover.
Yeah.
So essentially, Tom King is going to be the last big Batman writer that tells an epic long story. Whether you like him or not, though, it seems like Tim Seeley's saying those days are done, which sucks for somebody like me that has 100 story issue planned. You know what I mean? 100 arc story planned, not arc, but issues. Yeah. And then that I actually asked Tim Seeley if he would want to be on the podcast at some point after that. But that wasn't the big thing. But like, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? There's still one more thing that he says after this that I'm going to talk about. But just from that in general, your thoughts on everything's got to be fast paced. It's got to bring in new viewers, and long storytelling is essentially dead.
I can see it when it's kind of like just hearing him say it.
Yeah.
I can look back at some of those stories and be like, okay, there are certain writers that I definitely believe this is happening with. They are telling very short arcs and just saying, hey, this is a pocket story. This is a pocket story. This is a pocket story, which is a little hypocritical on our end because that's kind of what we want.
Mm-hmm.
But the only problem with that we are having, that we have had with, especially with the Batman book, me on some other books, is when you cut these stories short, when you're only trying to grab onto the hype or the meme of the month or whatever, trying to keep up with the trends, you're lacking in character development.
Yeah.
So another big title that we read that is, I feel like a victim of this type of storytelling. As much as I love the character, I love the writer, Nightwing.
Mm-hmm.
Nightwing has had pockets of stories, and Taylor had a story that hooked us at the very beginning of his run. Okay, you introduced a sister. You introduced like all these things. Dick Grayson's a billionaire now. Like you introduced all of these things, and not one of them has been picked up. It's just moved on to the next thing over and over and over and over and over again. And he can eventually come back to that. But at what point?
Yeah.
You know? At what point? And that's the other thing, that like when he eventually comes up with, a story to finally go back to those things, I don't want to hear people being like, oh, it was always connected from issue 1 to issue 147. Oh my God. Like, no, it's just, okay, he's done these pocket stories. He's going back to that. You can kind of throw all the other filth away and connect these other stories, and that's your story. It's not a longevity story. It's not a long running story from issue 1 to whatever he finally picks up that story plot. It's not an all connected moment. And that was the big thing that I get kind of irked with when writers who don't deserve that type of thing
Yeah.
get that handed to them by overhyped fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
You know?
agree. Yeah, and again, this is why I've said this from day one of this podcast. Probably, I don't know if I said it exactly on the first podcast, but I always said that Tom King's run is going to be looked back on and remembered, opposed to people being like, it was a shitty run. Because especially now, it's going to be the long last epic Batman run. Again,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not, he told a story over 100 issues, which is crazy. And who was the last person to do that before him? Grant Morrison, maybe? If you could even read that, like, because it's so convoluted at times. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Grant Morrison even reached 100, but even before then, I guess you could say Snyder. Like,
did 50.
yeah.
Or
But
52, I guess.
even 50, 52, like that's a feat within itself
Yeah, I
compared to
agree.
the new storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it did span over 4 years, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
because he was only doing monthly. So yeah, if you're a fan of long-term storytelling, that's really shitty for the big two. By the way, you were talking about how like indies are doing it all the time. Like,
Yeah. Spawn, Radiant Black,
yeah,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Walking
Mighty
Dead.
Walking Dead, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like
Yeah,
these are like even great example, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
mhm,
It's had 3 writers, but because of those 3 writers being so good friends, they have picked up exactly where the next one has left off, and
mhm,
it's seemingly a long form storytelling.
yeah,
Like that's what I want from my superheroes at DC and Marvel. Like I
yeah,
want to be able to read one run, read another one, and it actually feel like, oh, it's going from issue 1 to issue 59.
yeah,
Even though there has been 3 writers, that kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Seeley essentially says long form storytelling like that is done in the big two. The other guy was kind of also talking about like, well, what's the value to like releasing like weekly comics, like the floppies and stuff? Like, do you get better value from the trade or whatever? Because Seeley did say that like a lot of people usually give up after the first or second issue and they just end up buying the trade. And so that's when
Yeah.
this guy makes the comment about like the floppies or whatever. He was like, what value does it bring? And he was like, we bring value to the local man. Maybe it helps, is what Seeley says. Because there's no guarantee that I think I'm fucking tired of floppies. Like I literally at the moment and still just buying some books to support my local comic shop. But at the same time, it's because I'm like, well, I kind of want to sell all my stuff back to them. So I need to be somewhat cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I gotta keep my box open, gotta keep supporting. But it's just like I'm kind of tired of it. I like
it's hard to keep up with, man.
Yeah.
It's they have so much volume and
Mhm.
they take up so much space. Like
They're not easy to read after, like especially if
no.
you bag and board them. Not easy to read. Whereas a hardcover, even if you want to buy a trade that's like soft cover, it protects itself. It just sits on the
It's
shelf.
easy. It's easier to put on a shelf. Exactly. I've seen some unhinged people put their bag and board comics on a bookshelf.
Yeah.
And then have like just like little like paper tabs to mark like where each title starts and ends.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no. I'm sorry. No, no.
Somebody's
no,
had to have made like a binder for comics, right? Like,
oh yeah, I've seen those before too.
Yeah. So yeah, I gladly say death to floppies. Like I just don't think they provide any value. If you want to do like free comic book day floppies and like we got an exclusive mega ultra rare book last night when we watched The Flash. So like obviously we're going to be millionaires in the future for that one. But like, that's I don't know. I think floppies should be gone. But the last thing I asked Seeley after that, I asked, do you think comics could survive on just trade-based structure? Basically, only graphic novels are coming out, no floppies at all. Or is that something that comic companies would never do? I personally don't buy a lot of single issues anymore because of storage issues. And Seeley just says, my guess is that structure is inevitable. We're in the transition in between. So, see, in Seeley's mind, we are going to a trade-only market, which, in my opinion, I feel like that's so much better. Because if you want comics, instead of paying $3 for, I mean, what is it? Probably $5 nowadays. I don't remember what the prices are anymore. It's $30 a pop, and you get at least 6 issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's $5 an issue, which is totally fine, and it comes in a nicer package. You don't got to buy bags and boards. You don't got to worry about the storage. It can sit on your coffee table, sit on your bed, your nightstand. It just fits. It's a lot more better, and it's not as sensitive as a floppy.
I can see the trades going up in price when that happens, which will suck because currently, if you look at a trade paperback, it can be anywhere from $9.99 to about, I would say, $16.99 is the regular trade paperback. When you're looking at hardcover, I think that it can go anywhere from $16.99 to $49.99, depending on what type of hardcover it is.
Yeah.
And it's like we said before, it's a better format to protect itself, to look nicer being displayed. You can actually show people. It's easier to let people borrow that kind of thing compared to floppies. Like it's just a better format.
Yeah. Yeah, I just ruined a bunch of floppies recently because I framed them and I wanted to get the frames and take them out, and my dumbass didn't like think about how sensitive floppies are, and I put like some kind of sticky stuff on them. They all ripped. And like one of them was like a Spider-Man issue that was worth like $90 or some shit. So
yeah, I remember.
I was like, oh fuck. So that kind of sucked, but it is what it is. Yeah, so like I don't know, man. Not the best thing you want to hear as a comic book reader, especially if you are a fan of somebody like Tom King. Cause like the thing is what's nice about Tom King, he is doing his own indie stuff, by the way. But Tom King could leave like every other writer and do the indie stuff. But it's nice to have a writer like King playing in the sandbox with these characters that we love, right? Because it's like, all right, yeah, I want to hear his epic storytelling, but I'm not as interested, as much as I'm a Tom King fan, I'm not as interested in reading his indie stuff for 100 issues, right? It's good, but like I want to see Batman in an epic story. I don't want to see brand new character in an epic story. Maybe over time, I'll think like, oh, this is actually really good. I want to keep reading it, right? Kind of like with the Radiant Black and stuff you talk about, right? So like, new characters, you're like, oh, this is pretty epic. That's how I am with manga right now. Like I'm reading Spy Family, and that's already fucking, I don't know how many books in. I think they're like 88 chapters in already. That's probably like 15, 16 books. And like I picked those up and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Like I read them. Also, the one thing I do want to say is if we are going to go to a trade type of situation, comics need to come together and pick a fucking size. Oh my God, dude. I go to Barnes & Noble now to go buy mangas. 90% of mangas are all the same size. There's like the light novels are slightly bigger because they're actual novels, so they got to fit more on the pages. Totally makes sense. And there's very rarely like the special editions like Berserk or like Akira, the classics that are like in a bigger format. Oh my God, comics are all different. You get the trades, you get the fucking hardcover, like everything's a different size. And I'm like, y'all need to pick a fucking format and stick to it because it looks like shit. And if you don't believe me, go to a Barnes & Noble, go to your local bookstore, go to the comic part where it's graphic novels, and tell me it doesn't look like shit because they're all different. It looks bad on shelves. Whereas like manga, nicely displayed. You're like, oh, I can look at this. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at this one. You gotta fix it, comics. You gotta fix it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That's the craziness that came out of a random Twitter discussion. So you know what? You can actually get news from Twitter besides just a migraine. So I think that is kind of cool. Now we are going to move on to viewer questions right now, and then we are going to dive into our flash review after that. So do stick around. We only have one comment in our Discord because we said this so late, and it comes from Arwitz. If Gunn wanted a Batman trilogy, would you want to see only new villains not yet done on the big screen, or would you be okay with reoccurring villains? If so, which one? If you had a gun to my head, I would say all brand new villains because I've seen everything else. You know what I mean? But it comes down to how well do you do it? Like,
And I think it was earlier today. Let me actually look back at some of my messages that I was sharing with friends. Somebody asked Gunn, I believe, yesterday, and he replied today, or if it was both conversations yesterday. So yeah, it was yesterday. Somebody asked him, not trying to look for spoilers, but any underrated Superman villains that you adore. And he actually put really underrated characters. And
Yeah.
then somebody was like, I can't believe you didn't put Metallo or Bizarro in there. And he replied to them, he's like, because they're not underrated.
Yeah.
Like he understands what underrated means.
Mhm.
And so when going back to our question, if I say new characters, I can expect Gunn to know exactly which characters have been used.
Mhm.
And I know that he will pick characters that not even we would be like, hey, that's our top spot for a Batman villain.
Yeah.
And I think he could give them justice on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with the rogues gallery that he has. Like,
Yeah.
And the thing about Gunn too is he would pick one big bad and like a couple little bets. You know what I mean? And those would get like, that would just be like for a crime scene, right? A Batman takes out a guy at the start of the movie. He's fighting like, Crazy Quilt at the start of the movie, beats the shit out of him, puts him in Arkham, goes to Arkham. We see a bunch of random villains, but there's one big bad in the movie. Like James Gunn would do that. I would vote new villains 100%, but like as much as they've used Joker in everything, you could still tell a really good Joker story with Batman.
And yeah, and that's the thing with our last podcast saying that there are heavy rumors saying that Andy will be on Batman Brave and the Bold. I think that Andy will use Joker.
Yeah.
Do I need him in the first two movies? No.
Yeah.
I don't need him in the first two. If you put him as the last villain, it'll be the first time anybody has done that. And I'm okay with that. But give me somebody new for the first movie, maybe some reoccurring ones that we've seen in the second one, and give me a third movie with Joker.
Yeah. I've always said if I got to direct Batman, I would do a trilogy, no Joker in the trilogy at all. And then like at a Comic-Con, I'd come back and be like, oh, we got a new announcement. I'm coming back for a fourth movie, and then show that it's Joker. And then everybody be like, oh, fuck, like, I think that's how it would go down. Unless everybody just fucking hates my trilogy. They're like, he's coming back for another one. No.
They're all like, fuck this. There's no Joker. We're not going to this. And then be like, oh, now you want to give us Joker? Yeah. No, fuck you, dude.
Yeah. Zack Snyder did it better. There'd still be that one guy fucking 40 years from now. Yeah, anyway, so like there's that. But let's go on to the YouTube channel, which, by the way, a shout out to y'all guys again, killing it on the views. Another video breaking 1,000. So shout out. Thank you so much for listening. By the way, again, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do. YouTube literally this morning dropped new monetization requirements. Only need 500 subscribers and only 3 videos in a month, which we do that easily. And I think what is it, like 1,000, 2,000 watch hours, something that we're getting near. I think we're halfway there.
We're super close now. Yeah.
So definitely hit that subscribe button. If we get to 500, we can, it's not full monetization, but we could do like memberships and stuff, which might be kind of cool. Give you guys some emotes and stuff like that, which might be kind of cool that you could leave in the chat. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't. But going on to the first comment we got is from Tiny Beauty. What can I do as a viewer to spread the support for Batman News Weekly? I see the numbers are growing. Talk to your friends. If you are in, if you have friends that like Batman and here's the thing, man. I would love for anybody to support this podcast, to spread awareness. Let them know that we are not a cookie cutter podcast.
Yeah.
Because I think people might come in here and find us a little abrasive. They might be like, man, they hate everything. And be like, no, we're giving a perspective of like, we read good stories. We like those stories. And we think a lot of stuff today is kind of mediocre.
And one of the big things for us is we think that opinions are important,
Yes.
whether they be positive or negative.
Mhm.
Now, we're not going to completely destroy something just for the sake of destroying it.
Mhm.
We want to give valid criticism. If we're going to give a opinion that seems bad to others, we're going to give reasons on why that is. And it's not just because, oh, I said so.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so I would say have a little disclaimer and be like, yeah, if you want an opinion that has a wide variety of opinions on it, I would suggest listening to the Batman News Weekly podcast. You don't got to go hardcore with it. It'd be like, hey, just let them know like they're very opinionated people, and they have a wide variety. But I don't know. I think you can share. You can always share videos. Whether like what other, I don't know what social medias everybody's on today. I use Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever. Retweet our stuff when we do it, like because we do tweet out the podcast every once in a while. You could retweet it to your followers or whatever. Like I said, you could share it, just word of mouth, letting people know. Be like, oh yeah, you guys should check this out, whatever. Because I guarantee you, y'all are in spots that we're not in that maybe talk about superheroes. Maybe you got a little group of friends. Maybe you joined a random little subreddit or something like that. Granted, Reddit's not doing too hot right now, but like there could be any kind of situation like that. It really just comes to word of mouth and sharing it. Like, you know, we don't have stickers or anything that you could put out there. So unfortunately, we don't have anything like that. Maybe in the future. But yeah, I would say sharing it and word of mouth is the biggest thing you can do. But we appreciate anybody that wants to help out. Moving on from there, we got Eduardo de la Cruz. Question. Would you die for me? That's too easy. Would you live for who would win? Mirror Master versus The Spot. Blue Beetle versus Darth Vader. Fantastic Four versus the Teen Titans. Mirror Master in this, I think The Spot's more powerful, it feels like.
So this reiteration, of course, spoilers for Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Of course, the Spot is the villain. This gives like a wild, like multiversal take on the Spot, which is really, really cool. I've never seen Mirror Master jump multiverses.
Yeah.
That would be kind of wild. That would be a wild new power for Mirror Master. I mean, mirror dimension. Like I could easily see that happening. If he has, somebody please tell me where I can read it because I would love to read that story.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at just the two as they are, I think the Spot is a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, coming from the act, because like the Spot, I mean, I don't know much about him, but even if without the multiverse powers, just his basic power set from the start of the movie, I feel like it's probably a little bit better because you can't capture him in his own thing like Mirror Master. You can just break a mirror and he's like fucked.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, I can't get out, you know? Like
not only that, but like he like the Spots are literal like almost like teleporters and they're like he the way that he was making people punch themselves and doing all of that kind of thing, like he has a huge leg up on whoever he's fighting.
Yeah, so I would go with the Spot there. Blue Beetle versus Darth Vader. Why? Blue Beetle's got some powers though, but it always comes down to Force choke for me. Like
this one's hard.
He could think of a lightsaber.
Well, I think the way that the movie explains that, oh, anything that you think of, I can create, is like kind of they're taking free liberties with that, and they're just like, oh, you know, and I think it's just for the movie. It's that kind of concept, but not to the T, you know?
Yeah. I think we'd have to play in that realm though, because of most of what people know about Darth Vader is from the movies.
Yeah.
So you have to play in that realm.
If that is the case, if Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetle can summon a lightsaber from the suit, that would be OP, and I think Blue Beetle would win.
Blue Beetle might have the upper hand here because more than likely he knows what Star Wars is. So he probably would know how to beat Vader.
Yeah.
So I would just go, if we are just taking both of them from their respective universes, maybe Blue Beetle can beat Darth Vader with the suit. So that's a possibility. I think you could go with either of these personally. I always go down to Force Choke. I just feel like that's the most OP thing ever. I'm trying to think of somebody who probably like Dr. Manhattan. That's the easiest. That's an easy win though. Dr. Manhattan could probably just like it wouldn't matter to him because like I don't think you could choke Dr. Manhattan. Like
I mean, you could, but he would see it coming like 7 months before it happened.
Yeah.
So like he would then be planning ahead and or before. Like time is non-existent for him, so it really wouldn't matter.
If anything, fucking Zack Snyder taught me that fucking he could be working and fucking at the same time. So like you could literally be killing him and he could be like doing his job like somewhere else. So yeah, Dr. Manhattan's OP. Yeah, I would go either there. Fantastic Four versus Teen Titans. Which Teen Titans? Are we going with the classic? Like Robin, Starfire, you know, like the cartoon? Is that, I'm assuming that's the Teen Titans we're going with?
I would assume so. I think that when people think of Teen Titans, they think of Robin, Beast Boy, Raven, Starfire, and Cyborg.
Yeah.
Those are the 5 members that they think of. If that's the case,
I think I'd go Teen Titans here.
I might go Teen Titans. So
you already got a fire to cancel out fire, or fire to fight with fire.
Yeah.
You have, you know, Starfire versus Human Torch. You could do like Thing versus Beast Boy. I think he goes gorilla mode or something like that, right? Big thing to counteract that. Then you have Invisible Woman. I mean,
Invisible
I think it's countered
with Raven.
Yeah, it would get countered.
Would be the shields and all of that. But then I think it would take both Cyborg and Robin to take down Mr. Fantastic.
But when you think about like just the powers that the Teen Titans have, like Raven's super OP. Like when she's like, obviously when she gets older,
in her demon mode or whatever.
Yeah, like she's super OP. But also Cyborg boom tube those bitches. Boom tube, you know, you're gone. Like, you know.
But they've dealt with interdimensional space travel type of stuff.
So true. But here's the thing. Like, just imagine if it's like an annoying little brother and you wanted him to go away. Like Boom Tube, they got to find their way back. Yeah. And it's like, all right, we don't got to deal with them for another, you know, fucking while. Unless he has a device to get him instantly back to where he was. Like, is it Dormammu? Like, unless, you know, he's doing that. Like, I don't think, I think Boom Tubing, you know, because that would be considered a win in my opinion. Like, oh, they're gone.
You know? Yeah, but like for me, the fight between Beast Boy and Thing, like I think would actually be a hard fight. The Thing has gone head to head with the Hulk. Like the Hulk is not somebody to play around with. And I would not say that Beast Boy could have the strength of the Hulk, but he does have the strength of and the size and mass of whatever he takes on.
Yeah.
So like if he turns into a T-Rex or something, that's going to be quite a big fight for the Thing. But I think the Thing could keep up with him, you know?
After seeing the trailers from last night, Beast Boy needs to become the Meg. And he'll destroy the Thing hands down. But he won't be able to destroy Jason Statham. So that's
fucking difference. Wild. Dude.
Nobody could beat Jason Statham.
Dude, so I love how in that trailer, I literally like leaned over to you and I was like, Jason Statham is totally gonna punch the shit out of a fucking shark, and then the very next thing you see is him holding a shark back with his fucking foot.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Ridiculous. Him and like Vin Diesel and all those guys, I would respect it if in like 10, 20 years they're having like a round table and they're drinking beers and they're like recording this and they talk about how they had a secret pact to do the most ridiculous shit in movies. Because wrestlers do that. Like, that's how the People's Elbow became a thing for The Rock. In these house shows, they would just do stupid moves to make the crowd laugh. And the People's Elbow got over. And, like, Undertaker talks about how he thought that was the stupidest fucking move ever. But the audience loved it. So they just kept doing it. And so, yeah, I would love to be like, yeah, dude, we came up with the dumbest shit in movies to see what people would like. And Vin Diesel, I think, would take the crown on that, though. Insane. But, all right, moving on from that. We got Moncre who says, I sort of disagree with your take on DC spicy mangas not selling well in the US and having backlash. One, the manga could sell good at Spencer's for people that are not. I don't know if Spencer's is a worldwide chain, but Spencer's, imagine Hot Topic, because I think everybody knows what Hot Topic is, but like an adult version. To where, like, if you go to the back of the store, they got like fucking dildos and chokers and all this kind of shit. So just imagine a spicy version of Hot Topic, which actually, I want to say Spencer's usually have better shirts.
Yeah,
so they did. So there's that. Fair point. Half of DC fans are lewd grown-ups. Fair. Erotic graphic novels / comics already exist in comic shops. Another fair point. DC would have an edge over Marvel's who's more family friendly. I mean, yeah, they already have that though. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Marvel bought Star Wars and literally said no more Bikini Leia. So like, you know, that's they're definitely have an audience they're pitching to. Not all places in America would be up in arms. Maybe it's just where I live. I have no idea where Moncray lives. But we said the South would be up in arms.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we said. What are your thoughts? I think you make a lot of fair points here, Moncray. And I don't think it's out of the possibility to do that. I just don't know if it would be as popular as something like Japan.
Yeah.
Because you got to think, like, here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially if you're in America. A lot of people outside of America think we're fucking sensitive. They're like, y'all bitch about a lot of shit. There's a lot of words that we no longer use in America that are used in other countries fairly frequently. And they're just like, y'all are soft. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the, now granted, everybody can have their own opinions on the, like, you know, gender norms and all that kind of stuff in different countries. A lot of Latino countries don't like Latinx. That's an American thing. And they're just like, no, we appreciate like LGBT communities. We just think that's fucking dumb, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like an American thing. So like, I don't know if it would necessarily be a big thing here in America. I think a lot of people in America would maybe be a little too sensitive to the idea, because I've always said they're a little prunish. You know what I mean? But times are changing. I mean, look at OnlyFans. Look at, you know, there's a lot of women, especially during the pandemic, that were like, fuck my job. I'm just going to take my clothes off and make more money than I ever could have. And you know what? More power to them. If I had a fucking rockin' bod and I could do that, I'd probably do the same shit, because some of those ladies are fucking living the life. It's insane. So yeah, I think there is a market for it, but I think this market, you're going to find it from independent artists right now. Because like I said, people have made these books. They've made spicy comics. I mean, you'll find them all over Twitter and Reddit if you want to look for them. But will DC actually do it? No. I don't think DC or Marvel will ever do it. But you know what? I don't know how hard we were on the last podcast, but I'll say, yeah, there's a market for it. 100%. I'd pay for it. I mean, we have some artists that we follow, like, what's her name? That was doing the spicy Final Fantasy stuff.
Oh, Jen Bartel.
Yeah, Jen Bartel. She said she was going to put out a book. I was like, when? Like, you know, I don't know if that book ever came out, because I don't know if she can.
Oh, I don't know if she can with the Marvel or DC characters.
Yeah.
But the Final Fantasy stuff, she was very like internet friendly, safe for work type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then one day she was like, hey, I'm going to put this like spoiler tag on this photo.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh my God, it was like X-rated. Like people were like, oh my God, I just opened this at work. What the hell are you doing, Jen? Like,
yeah. This is why you should have 2 Twitter accounts, people. That's all I'm saying. 2 Twitter accounts. It's good. You put the other one on private and look at whatever you want. Just don't look at it at work. It's not a good thing. So yeah, moving on from that. So yeah, I don't know how hard we are on it, but I will say there's a market for it. I would definitely pay for shit like that. I just don't think the big 2 would ever get on board. So that's why I think it would fail. But yeah, going on from Vasan, who I don't think we've had a comment from Vasan in a hot minute.
In a while.
Yeah. So it says Damien and Cass is just straight up incest. Plus, Cass has a better parent-child relationship with Bruce than Damien. Where does this come from?
I don't know. I think this is the what would be more interesting, the child question. I never knew that. Was there a question that said Damien and Cass?
I don't know, but that it wouldn't be incest. They're not related. She's
Yeah.
literally called Orphan, and Bruce wasn't like her biological father or anything.
Now I will say this. I have dove in a little deep with Batgirl research recently.
Mm-hmm.
And there was at one point where don't know if this is a retcon or whatnot, but Batman Bruce Wayne did at one point consider adopting her. Yes.
We should
So
go
I
from like
don't
orphan to adopted. Would that be your new name?
yeah, I don't know if this was necessarily something that was actually put into place in comics or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I mean, we still to this day very much see that her mother is in fact Shiva, like, right?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
Shiva? Yeah,
yeah. I think
yeah.
so.
And of course, her father being freaking No Man's Land, Michael Caine. Like,
Yeah.
they've established this before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it still would not be incest because they're not blood related.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Unless he means like stepbro, stepsis, but yeah, it's still not the same. Cause like I had somebody talk about like, cause when I was playing the spicy game stuff, I always dive into these like discords to see like, all right, who's the audience for this? You know what I mean? And a lot of people will talk about like incest and stuff, and they're like, yeah, they're stepbro and step. I'm like, that's not incest, guys. I need to technically learn. They're not blood related. Like, it's just not the way it works.
is
That's
it
why
weird? Yes.
it
But
can
are
be, yeah.
they actually related? No.
Yeah. But that's why I think that's first, because like somebody asked me, was it on this podcast about, no, I don't know where it was asked. Somebody might have, I think somebody asked it during my live stream. They asked why like the step bro thing is so popular. And I was like, one, because I think it's a meme. And
Yeah.
I was like, two, it's because like, oh, it's just a random situation that people might find themselves in. Like, not everybody, but it's like, oh yeah, what if you got married to somebody and it's like your sister's like this super hot person? You're not related. It's just like, oh, well, crazy situation, you know? So like, yeah, I kind of think that's where that comes from. But I think it was birthed from a meme. So it is what it is. That's why it got so popular. All right, moving on from, but yeah, I don't know where the Damien casting came from. There must have been a baby question or whatever, a kid question. Nathan says, okay, last one. Which character would be the most interesting to see? Kid of Cyborg Bumblebee. Whoa, okay. Wait, Bumblebee is an actual character, right? Not the car.
No, not
Yeah.
not the Transformer.
Yeah.
The DC character. Bumblebee.
Yeah, okay.
She's a Titan.
Yeah, Blue Beetle Jessica Cruz, Poison Ivy Swamp Thing, Bluebird The Signal, Shazam Stargirl. Now, if I
Okay.
want,
Shazam Stargirl, very predatory. Very, very odd. Yes, it's the child who turns into an adult.
yeah,
Stargirl is still somewhat a child. So
I'm assuming they mean the kid version. They
Yeah.
date.
Get older and
Yeah.
yeah.
Would it be cheating though if it's Shazam and Wonder Woman, and then because that's also weird. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
do you just permanently stay as Shazam at that point? You're like, no, I'm gonna stay as Shazam. As Shazam, can he take off the suit?
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's weird. I guess Dwayne Johnson's character did do too, huh? Anyways, Bluebird, if I'm not mistaken, is not straight.
No, she is not.
Yeah, so that's off the table. Poison Ivy Swamp Thing would be interesting, but they kind of play her up as more like she's only into women right now, so that'd be another one. But then again, that's kind of getting into a thing. They're plant people. Does it matter? Like,
Yeah.
so there's kind of that. That would be an OP character, an OP child. I will say
Yeah.
that. Blue Beetle, Jessica Cruz. Again, age difference, maybe.
Large age difference. Yeah.
Well, he is going to college now, though. So she's probably in her 20s.
I think she is more closer to her 30s because
Okay.
I don't know if you were reading Justice League at this time, but near like the beginning of Rebirth, there was a story where the entire Justice League like met their future children,
Yeah.
and Jessica Cruz and the Flash, Barry Allen, had children.
What? Have an
Yeah,
iris there. He
you
got
don't
tired of
remember
us
that
being the
story?
Flash? No, I don't remember that at all. I'm just gonna okay. Let's just assume everybody is into everybody in this situation, and they're all of adequate age, so they're all
Uh,
aged up.
I would honestly be more interested in a cyborg Bumblebee child,
Interesting.
because how does that happen?
Oh, hey, bionic penis. Like, obviously. He's got what is it? Dark side sperm. So fucking what no anti-life equation sperm. That's how he gets it going. I don't know. I think if everybody here, I mean, Stargirl just has a staff though, right? Like she's not got anything else.
She doesn't have any powers herself. It all comes from the
Yeah.
staff.
So that's not exciting. I would just want to see how OP Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing's kid could be.
Yeah.
Because they're both insanely OP. Like, could they go like to the moon and create life? You know? Like, how OP could they be? Do they need something? Like, could they just take a seed and like water to the moon and fucking create life?
I don't think it's that wild, you know?
But they create oxygen. That's the thing, right? Like, don't they say you need to terraform something and then fucking over time, like plant shit and then oxygen makes enough of it? Like,
yeah, but like you don't think that Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing can terraform the fucking moon, do you?
But they can like recreate life basically anywhere. It feels like on because there has been like world end events. I mean, she created that whole paradise for Harley Quinn under Gotham. So like they can create shit in terrible places. Ivy's even in the animated series, she hides out in like a toxic area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like and again, she could take over anybody. So like I feel like she could take over people, use them to help her. She could take over Superman, be like, yo, I need you to move mountains on the moon and like, you know, do all this shit and like we're gonna plant shit. I don't know. I feel like they'd be super OP. Because also, like, wasn't it didn't like Swamp Thing do something like crazy in the Undead or Deceased movie or like thing? Didn't he like kill everybody that was like in a dead area and he like planted himself or some shit?
So I remember in the first Deceased story, he was like the key to everything at the very end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I remember that.
I feel like I think they could do something insane like that. So I would go with that. Moving on, Alexis Barrera says, which of these villains would fit best into the Batman mythos? Michael Myers, Vector, Megamind, Syndrome, or Orochimaru? Orochimaru. Hands down. Out of all of those, Orochimaru. I think yeah. For those of you that know, that's a Naruto villain who controls like big snakes and stuff like that. Well, he does a lot of things, but he is basically like a snake-based type of character. He's very manipulative, and I think he would fit very well into the Batman mythos. Syndrome's a little goofy. I feel like if Syndrome's going to be anywhere, he's going to be in the Superman mythos. Same thing with Megamind.
I can see them in both in the same. I can see Syndrome being both a Gothamite and part of Metropolis.
I just feel like Syndrome would admire Superman more because Superman's a bright light and stuff, you know, kind of like Mr. Incredible. I don't think you'd get that vibe with Batman. But I mean, I could believe it a little bit, but not.
So who is Vector?
I'm not no idea.
I don't recognize that name at all.
Yeah. Unless they meant to say like Victor, which is it Victor Rorschach or what's Jason? Oh, I was gonna say what's Jason's real name? It's Jason. Jason Voorhees. I'm dumb. I feel like there's an evil villain named Victor though. And that's what they could have been trying to go for, but I don't know what Vector is.
Oh, wait. Vector. Wait. Is it Vector or Victor? Because I typed in Vector
Yeah.
villain, and it came up with Victor Perkins, which is the villain from Despicable Me, the dude in the orange jumpsuit.
Oh, really? I've never seen Despicable Me, but I know that character because he has the fucking like twerking meme or whatever he
Yeah,
does.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that guy? I feel like that guy's like a Flash villain for
Yeah,
some reason, you know?
yeah.
No, I think Orochimaru fits into the Batman mythos so well. Cause like I don't know if snakes eat bats if they have the opportunity to or not.
I
But
think bats would eat snakes.
oh, there you go. I think it even works as well too. So yeah, I would say Orochimaru after all of those is probably the best. Last one, we got Clay. What long-term relationship would make fans rage the most? Batman Harley Quinn, Batgirl Red Hood, Penguin Catwoman. Hold on, there's more. Nightwing spoiler. Rage the most. Not Batman Harley. I think there's a lot of people that want that.
I think it would be spoiler Nightwing.
Yeah, probably because Tim Drake fans
not
and Nightwing fans.
Nightwing fans with Batgirl and Starfire. Like the Starfire Batgirl conversation happens on my feed all the fucking time.
Yeah.
But the Batgirl Red Hood was just a phase, guys. Let's just leave it alone. That 3 Jokers story doesn't exist. Penguin and Catwoman, like
happened.
Again, it happened. It was just a weird psychedelic dream. We don't need to look back on it. So yeah, I think it would honestly be Nightwing spoiler.
Yeah, I've seen Batman Harley in R34. It's a pretty good relationship. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, I would say Nightwing. If you include the fandoms, yeah, I think Nightwing and spoiler, Tim Drake and Nightwing fans would go crazy. But if we're being fair in current comics right now, Tim Drake left her to go be with another guy. So you can't say that spoiler doesn't have the opportunity to go date other people. So just for fairness.
True.
So, but although Nightwing is currently dating Barbara, so it shouldn't matter. But yeah. Also, I don't know how big the age gaps are because we don't know how fucking old spoiler is anymore. Because I thought she was probably pushing like either she's like 18 to 20, but they make her seem like she's a child in Batgirls.
Yeah, because the implication was that Tim was going off to college. Tim and her were somewhat the same age for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the most recent Batgirl story with Becky Cloonan, they very much made them feel like 14, 15.
Yeah.
And that's just weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that would
but
make...
they also... It feels like they've also aged down Tim Drake, though.
But it's weird because now he's like living on a boat by himself. So like, it kind of doesn't make sense because I'm like, you would still be in school. And it seems like I feel like, he's probably like in college. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Probably early years of college.
I've always viewed Tim Drake as like 16, 17, whereas Nightwing and Red Hood are like early 20s. Batman, like, mid 30s, maybe early 30s, mid 30s. I always think Batman is 10 to 12 years older than Nightwing.
Yeah.
That's how I always view it. But yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. Anyways, that is it for questions, ladies and gentlemen. So now we are entering the danger zone. If you do not want to listen to spoilers for The Flash, this is your time to stop listening to the podcast. Just put it on pause, go watch The Flash, come back, listen to the rest of the podcast. You know what? Start listening to the podcast on your ride back home to let us know or to get our thoughts on it. And then leave a comment on the YouTube video to let us know what you thought about the movie. But yeah, so starting spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Clay, what did you think of The Flash?
This was a good movie. It was not the best superhero movie out there. It was not the greatest super movie out there. It was a good movie, which I personally think is a good thing for this movie. It has been getting a bad rep, of course, with the stuff that's been happening with Ezra, the fact that this movie has been in development hell for nearly 7 years.
Yeah.
This movie being a good movie is a good thing. Now, that being said, if it's just a good movie, do I have some gripes with it? Yes. There was some that I shared with Juice immediately after we got out of the theater.
Mhm.
And we were planning on actually recording immediately after, but it was a much later showing than we thought,
Yeah.
and we got home at like nearly midnight. So we're like, yeah, let's just wait.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a little sting of anxiety last night during the movie, which kind of sucked, and then I just couldn't shake it after the movie. Driving home sucked because I don't know if you noticed this on my car, but one of my headlights is out. So like
Really?
I was driving and like where we live, there's not a lot of lights.
Oh,
So
no, no, no.
like
Like recently, your street has gotten a little bit darker recently. I
yeah.
don't know why.
So they widened it. That's why.
Yeah.
But like fucking yeah, it's like hella dark now. I had one headlight and I was like had anxiety and I'm like, I'm already nervous that I'm like, dude, if a cop sees me, I'm getting pulled over for this shit. So like that fucking sucks. And so I was just kind of like already nervous from that. But anyway, so yeah, we didn't record last night because I was like, man, I just don't feel comfortable to record. So that's why we're doing it today. But yeah, so do you want to start into those gripes or how do we want to go about this?
So, well, I will ask you, what did you think of this movie?
So we're gonna talk about that intro here in a little bit. Dude, when first of all, I loved the start of the actual like graphic intro to the movie where they went through all the different like WB signs
Yes,
and
that's what I wanted to
yeah.
point it out. So the really cool thing in the very beginning of this movie, because usually it'll have like uh 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 the studio that worked on it or
Yeah.
the editing or whatever, and then they'll of course put the studio WB and
Yeah.
then of course DC's logo. And they went through the very first logo of WB all the way to the
Mhm.
current, and they did the same thing with DC. And I
Yeah.
thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
That
It
was the
wasn't
coolest
that
opening.
Yeah, it wasn't that weird like DCEU intro where Batman's throwing the Batarang and there's that weird like, Aquaman and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't that.
I think this is the first DCEU movie sans Man of Steel
Mhm.
that has it. That doesn't have it. I
Yeah.
think BVS had it. I think Suicide Squad have it, but I think everything else, like
Did BVS have it? I don't know if BVS had that.
I need to look back on it.
Yeah, I feel like it started like when we thought we were getting a solidified DCU is when it kind of started.
Okay.
Maybe like
So
with one of the first Wonder Womans.
I was gonna say probably Wonder Woman was the first one then,
Yeah.
if that was the case. So everything after Wonder Woman has it. So I assumed that's what we would be getting in this movie,
Yeah.
and we didn't get it. Instead, we got the WB and DC going through time.
Yeah.
That was really fun. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that.
That was awesome. But as for the movie, so I have to kind of like the movie was a ride for me at points because the intro is something to be witnessed. I will say that. And instead of like sitting there and enjoying it, my brain was like, oh my God, the fucking internet is going to talk about this like crazy.
Yeah. So I love sitting next to Juice in movies
Yeah.
because Juice reacts without reacting. Uh,
Yeah.
as somebody who has a reaction channel,
Yeah.
he knows how to keep his composure
Mm-hmm.
in a public place, which I think is absolutely hilarious. But his face speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So this scene, I will let Juice explain the scene, but I watched the scene. I'm like putting my hands on my temple, thinking like
his hands were on his face for a while.
I was like, what is going on with this movie?
Yeah.
And I just look at Juice and he's like shaking his head a little bit and like just like gaping at the fact of what we just watched.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So let's get into this intro. So it starts off at a coffee shop. And there's some very like at the start, the banter. I'm like, Snyder Bros are gonna fucking hate this. Like I hate that they have a space in my brain, but it's because those are the ones that are gonna be bitching online, right?
Yeah.
And as much as I try to block them, they just fucking sprout. They keep sprouting. They're weeds.
Yeah.
And so there's this banter going on, which I thought it was good banter for like the coffee shop guy. There was already some few laughs, like right at the start of the movie, a few laughs from the audience. And I was like, okay, interesting. Because remember, me and Clay judge things differently than the GA. And
Yeah.
in this studio, in this place we were at, apparently we don't know who y'all are. We don't know if you know we exist. We found out y'all exist yesterday. Apparently, other reviewers and stuff were in this theater. There was a
Yes.
guy, an older guy in front of us that was getting, he had a few fans. He was sitting next to a few fans. And there was a couple of other guys that had like some masks and stuff that were also people, because we just heard chatterings of like, oh, that's so-and-so. They're probably here to review it and yada, yada, yada. And this other guy was talking to this dad and son in front of us. They were like, oh yeah, did you like Spider-Verse? Which I have a note on that guy because he said something about Spider-Verse. I was like, well, wait, I want to talk about that. But anyways, so we're in there, some audible laughs. We get there's this one moment where Barry's like, where's curly haired girl? Like, she knows my order. She knows how to do all my stuff. And this guy's all like, oh, she's out sick, or maybe with her new boyfriend. And like, it's just a chatty, like Starbucks kind of character. And Barry's like, I'm fucking late. I need you to hurry up. And, he gets a call from Alfred. Alfred's like, hey, there's some drama going on in Gotham. And Barry's like, can't you call Superman? He's like, kind of busy. Can't you call Diana?
And you see on the TV, you see the back of Superman, by the way. You see the back of Superman, and he is like heat visioning, like it looks, I can't remember what it was actually.
No, I'm not too sure.
Whether it be like on an island somewhere or something, but it was like a crisis, and you saw him somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then Barry mentions Wonder Woman. He's like, I tried, she's just not answering.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, this is a Gotham problem. Why isn't our Bat friend even doing anything about it? He's like, well, actually he is, but he's somewhere else in Gotham. So you need to figure out this problem.
Yeah. And the one thing you'll notice about this movie is there's a lot of comments that push the story along without them showing it. And I'm curious because I know you are somebody that you'd rather be seen than told. But I think sometimes you have to do that. And there's one very key moment that they do that at the very end to make sense of something. I want to get your thoughts on that at the very end. But one of the comments was, he was like, oh, wow, I'm surprised that Bruce is even awake at this hour because it's during the day. Yeah. And you don't really ever see Batman out during the day much. So, and what's happening is everybody's seen this in the trailers already and stuff like that. But it's where Batman's on the fucking bike and he's chasing somebody down. He's trying to chase down some guys that have some very bad things that can destroy Gotham, like always. But Barry's called in because he's like, oh, yeah, there's like some pipes rupturing and stuff, and we need people to be saved from this hospital. Barry gets there, and he's just very like, this sucks. Like, I got things to do, yada, yada. And Alfred's all like, oh, pipes are bursting. Like, you need to kind of go save somebody. I thought that before that happens, though, he saves somebody that is like falling to the ground. I thought it was very funny that he, instead of going down and grabbing them and saving them, he uses a thing to grab, like to tie around them so they don't fall. He
uses a hose from a fire truck,
yeah,
ties it around them, and then goes off. And you just see the guy like hanging.
Yeah,
I'm like, dude, you could have just grabbed him and then just put him on the ground. Like, why did you do that?
To be fair, though, I think he kind of mentions why he doesn't do that, though.
Oh yes, and we'll mention it when that conversation happens.
Yes, for sure. So as this goes on, just to fast forward, the building starts collapsing, and they're showing this one nurse that is stuck in the building that is already starting to break down, and she's in the nursery. I don't know is that what it's called? I don't know where they keep all the babies. Yeah. And there's all these babies just chilling, and one nurse, and it's like a hospital that's really high up, many, many stories, and all the glass shatters, and they start falling, and Barry's like, oh shit. And you see this shit. Me and Clay, I saw Clay like freak out when this one part happened. The lady grabs one of the babies as all the other ones start flying out of the windows. They're just falling. And she grabs this one, and when she falls out the window, she just chunks this baby.
She lets go of the baby. I almost audibly like gasped. I was like,
Clay like moved in his chair and was like, what the what? And I just stood still because I'm like, oh no. Because I'm already thinking about like, one, I was like, they're going to make comments about CGI here. I was like, people are already going to bitch about that. And just the awkwardness of her chunking a baby, like, is people are going to say that. And then that's not even the craziest thing. So Barry, he has this. I thought this was a nice touch. He monitors his calories to
Yes.
see like how much energy he has, which I think is kind of cool. And he's like, I'm very low on energy, like, but he sees all the babies falling, and he's like, oh fuck. So he jumps up. We've seen this in the trailer, this moment where he goes upward and he's like traveling up a barrier. And you think he's about to capture all of the babies that are about to fall. And it makes it seem like that. And he's like thinking of like, oh, he's seeing in real time, like how all of these babies are about to die because one's about to get hit by knives. Another one's about to get hit by fire. Acid's gonna, I don't know why acid was near a baby, but like acid's about to fall on a baby. Like all of these scenarios. And then of course he sees the nurse like falling and like trying to grab a baby, right? All like, what is the famous painting of God and David or whatever it is? I don't know what it's called, but it looks like that, but a baby and fucking the nurse. And of course, they kind of do an MCU joke here, and he runs up, and it looks like he's about to save the nurse, and there's a vending machine, and he breaks it.
He moves the nurse out of the way, and he jumps on top of the vending machine, breaks it open, and just starts snacking super fast. Everything is still slow-mo, but it's going a little bit faster now that he's like pulled his attention away, and then it goes back now that he has the energy. And this is where his like plan of action starts to move forward, right? You see him like eating a burrito for some reason, and then like he throws the burrito. He grabs a pan and he throws the pan. Like he goes and essentially he starts to like move things, and those objects then touch the other objects that pretty much put the babies in a safer position, right? Eventually the baby that's about to get hit by fire,
that was the wildest fucking thing.
The Flash grabs a microwave, opens the microwave, and then catches the baby in the mic. He doesn't put the baby in the microwave. He puts the microwave around the baby. Closes the door, and then you see him slowly start to like, he uses his fingers to kind of like slowly guide the things down. Eventually they get close enough to the ground.
There is a dog too. That's fine.
A service dog. He eventually gets to the ground where he has like a little stretcher from an ambulance, and he's slowly putting the babies on the stretcher. He grabs the nurse, he puts the dog on it, he puts the microwave on the stretcher also, and finally everything stops. The woman screams. He's like, oh yeah, hold on. And he like the microwave dings like as if it was done. He opens the microwave and hands the baby to her. The nurse screams even more. This had, I think, a good chunk of the theater laughing. But I was just like, oh no.
I was that intro really had me worried because I was like, they're starting off this silly, like this could be really bad. And I wasn't really laughing. I was like, because I didn't know what to expect from this movie. And when you intro something with that, like if this scene was in the middle of the movie, I think I would have probably enjoyed it way more because you would have built up the characters. I would have known how silly they were kind of were or whatever. But right at the start, I was just like, oh no. And I was already a little worried. Clay's hands were still on his head at this point. And Barry's all like, yeah, you should probably talk to a therapist and do some traumatic stuff because this could affect your life. The Justice League's not really good with that. So bye. And he like leaves, and that's when it cuts to Batman doing Batman shit. And
so I was going to ask you, okay, so majority of what we saw is a majority of what we've seen in the trailers.
Yes, unfortunately.
But there is one particular scene that you have avoided like the plague. And I want to know your opinion on it.
Was it at the start?
No. It's at the end. So,
Batman is having to talk about that.
Well, no.
I guess it's already in the trailer.
It's in the trailer. It's the chase scene. So, the chase scene, it's actually really good. I really like the chase scene. There's a point where Batman like has this like rod that comes out of his bike, and he crashes into two cars to get them out of the way. I was like, holy shit! Hope those people are safe. But they end up getting onto a bridge, and the bad guys basically crash a car, and Batman basically has to get rid of his motorcycle, right? And this is where we see a really cool scene where he is like, well, the first thing that happens is he like is twirling out of the fire.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really cool looking. So from that moment on, where you see him using the grappling hook onto the car and everything else, how did you feel about the close-ups on Batman and his suit, seeing it in action?
The blue didn't stand out as much as I thought it would. I will say that. But dude, just in that, like, I mean, he probably has what, like 2 to 5 minutes of screen time, you know?
As Batman, yeah.
Yeah. But that chasing, dude, the amount of shit he has on that bike was so fucking Batman. First, he has the battering ram that you showed. When he turns his like the fucking rocket booster turns into like a thing to help him like fucking basically drift.
Yeah.
And then it turns back into a rocket, which I thought that was fucking clever as fuck, because that would explain how he can turn things so like quickly. He has shields to block him from shooting, like from getting dodging machine guns or whatever. And like I was just like, holy fuck, this is so Batman awesome. Like, you know what I mean? I just thought that was really cool. And he got dropped off by a fucking Batwing, and I thought that was really cool. And so, like, very Batman-esque. One thing I do have a complaint about. They made Affleck do a Batman voice, and I don't think it was good.
Yeah, they didn't use his voice modulator.
Yeah. I don't know why they would change that. So that means if Muschietti is going to be the Batman Beyond or Batman Brave and the Bold director, probably not going to do voice changer, which is okay if you get somebody that knows how to do a good voice. I didn't think Pattinson's was too bad. I also didn't think Pattinson was that different from Bruce to Batman.
Yeah.
So curious on the stylistic choices there, but we'll talk about that a little later, if anything, after we do our whole review. But only thing I didn't like was that. Then I don't know what you thought about this, because I feel like people are gonna talk about this. He actually catches up to the bad guys. May or may not have killed some. I don't really know. They're going pretty fast.
Yeah,
going pretty fast. He throws one off while they're driving. And
then intimidate. He intimidates somebody to jump out of a car at like a 60 to 80 mile an hour vehicle.
Yeah. The one thing that if you're doing Batman stuff like this, the one thing you need to show after this is you need to show those people captured or getting arrested and being like, hey, those guys are pretty beat up, but they'll live. That's all you got to do. You don't got to do that every single time, but you got to have a reporter be like, surprisingly, no casualties were yada, 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 whatever. And stuff like that. But here, Batman kind of, threw caution to the wind, was fucking these guys up. And then they fall off of the mountain, or they fall off the bridge. Batman uses his grappling hook and holds on to this guy. I thought it was very cool. I love the wide shot of Batman just hanging from the thing, holding this dude. It was really cool. The guy was about to fall.
I legit thought that Flash was going to come like running on water and capture either the guy, or if the thing were going to drop, because Alfred was like, if that thing touches the water, it'll destroy half of Gotham.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. So I thought Flash was going to come in to save the day.
But
instead, we see a golden fucking lasso.
Yeah. And Wonder Woman pulls up Batman and this criminal. And, she's there and he's all like, I'm glad you showed up. Like, Batman's very goofy at this point. And I was like, oh no. But then they show the lasso is tied around him. He's like, oh yeah. And then he's like, I got a lot of childhood trauma. And the guy's like, I got a lot of childhood trauma too. And Barry shows up and he's like, oh no. And then Barry's like touching the lasso to help Bruce get it off. Because Diana's just like looking at them. Because like, when he says it, it kind of gives a vibe like, oh, is there something between Diana and Bruce here? The way he talks. And that could track with what we saw in the Snyder movie and all that kind of jazz. Well, I don't remember it too much. I think it was more in Justice League than other one.
No. It was more in the Snyder movie, because they had a little bit more on screen together in the Snyder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to think of like, is that scene where she pops his shoulder in Snyder's movie? Because that's when they kind of like bond and talk. I just don't know if that's in Snyder's.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Anyways, so it looks like there's a little flirtatious going on there, but you find out because his demeanor is totally different. And you're just like, oh, that's not Batman. I don't like jokey Batman. I am not a fan. Like that's instantly what my brain thought. Then I saw the lasso and I was like, I can let it slide.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, whatever, because it's the lasso. The lasso makes you tell your full truth. Granted, I did see some people on Twitter, because obviously some people saw this movie in the fan. Somebody was like, we don't like jokey Batman. The only jokey lasso of truth thing he should do is say, I'm Batman. And I'm like, that's fair. That's fair. But I didn't bother that too much. Barry gets caught up in this. And this is at the moment when I'm like, they're going a very interesting way with the Flash character. And I would come to really enjoy it by the end. At first, I thought it was a little off-putting. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, so he is caught up in the lasso because he's trying to get Bruce off of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, I know what sex is. I've just never experienced it before. And like, it lets go of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman's like, it was nice seeing you guys again. See y'all later. And she flies off.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this. The character of Barry, because we will get to another important part of Barry's story later on in this movie. A lot of dick jokes.
Yeah.
A lot. Like from beginning to end, there is a lot of dick jokes.
Loves the word shit too.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, we're going to talk about it. It comes mostly from one Barry more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it will make sense of it here in a little bit. But anyways, so Bruce and Barry kind of talk about it, and they're like, there's no coming back from that, is there? And he's like, nope. And so we move on from that. And if I'm not mistaken, he goes back to the coffee shop and he kind of like gets his thing and he goes off to his job. And we can kind of fast forward through a lot of this. It's where he kind of meets Iris West. I did not know the Latino that's in this movie, that is his quote unquote friend, coworker or whatever, is the Vine guy.
Yeah.
I didn't fucking know that, which makes sense on why David Dobrik's dumbass was at the Flash screening, the red carpet.
Yeah.
I hate David Dobrik. He sucks. I think he's a terrible human. But like they came up together on Vine. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. I was shocked. I was just all like, that's a huge come up for that guy.
Yeah, I knew that he was in this movie. Didn't want to share it with you because I didn't want you to get any more information about the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So pleasantly surprised there. Like, I love seeing, even though I actually like that guy's comedy. He did some cool stuff for a long time. Good get for him, man. That's awesome. I love seeing that come up. That's great. So I was very shocked by that. I was like, oh, because he's like on a Segway, or like they call them hoverboards, but they're not really hoverboards. And he's like on one of those, and then there's like this like goofy girl that's like, I guess his girlfriend. I don't know if they're boyfriend girlfriend in that particular moment, but they're coworkers.
Yeah.
And so they're making fun of Barry essentially, and Barry's like trying to solve a case or whatever. His boss kind of gets in, like reams him essentially. This is where we meet Iris West, because I guess his boss was closing a case that Barry was still working on, and he's like, I'm still working on that evidence. Like, why is he doing this? And his friends are like, who fucking cares? And Barry, this is where you get a little bit of the first emotion from Barry, because he's like, because it fucking matters. Like, these are people's lives. He doesn't say fucking, not there at least. And he's all like, because this matters. And I don't know at this point if these two people know his father. I think they would.
I think that the Allen case is a big thing. So I think that they would connect the dots.
Yeah. They're just shitty people.
Yeah, I was going to say they're shitty enough people to not give a fuck about how he's connected to that.
Yeah. Iris shows up. She wants to talk to him. They try to make jokes about him and, that kind of whatever. And then Iris kind of reveals, she's like, oh, yeah, I am a reporter. And he's like, oh, I have no official comment. And so like Barry automatically catches on to that Iris might be trying to get a scoop out of him. And he tries to say like, my dad's innocent. And she's like, oh yeah, I mean, that's what you would think. And like, Iris is kind of being a little bitch here, like not intentionally, but like what she's saying can kind of come off as kind of rude. Yeah. And Barry's like, I have to go. And she kind of understands that. She's like, oh, I kind of fucked up there. And so Barry leaves. And at this point, I think, does he just go home and he like gets a note from Bruce Wayne, right? Checks the footage. It's not what he wanted. And then he talks
Yeah,
to his dad.
and he talks to his dad at the penitentiary.
Yeah.
And this is when he actually like they have a conversation about his mother,
Mm-hmm.
and while on the phone,
Yeah.
he transfers it to his suit and he runs to his childhood home.
Yeah.
And like they're having a conversation. This is something that they have changed for the movies. His mother is Mexican.
Yeah. I was just all like, yeah, Flash half Mexican. Fuck yeah.
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 I thought that was really, really cool. Great performance by the mother, by the way.
Yeah.
I thought she did very, very well in every scene that she was in. And they're kind of reminiscing on the fact that like, oh, she would sing when she was at home, and they
Mhm.
kind of make a joke out of it or whatever. And then eventually the call gets disconnected because you can only be on the phone for so long when you're locked up or whatever. Barry is upset from the emotional conversation and bringing back memories, and he starts to run.
Mhm.
And this run, you could tell it's gonna be different because whenever he runs from the moment the movie starts to now,
Mhm.
they put a close up on his face.
Yeah.
But at this time, they do a close up at his feet, and his feet just keep going and going and going and going. And then eventually you see him like basically go into space time, I believe.
Mhm.
And it's all black and blue. And then
Yeah.
like things start to like stretch and get all wonky and weird. And then like this weird dome comes over him.
Mhm.
And there's like, I don't exactly know what to call it, but it's like almost like a stadium setting where like all of these things are surrounding him, or a
Yeah.
coliseum almost
Yeah.
like setting. Um, and if you look close enough, they're like events that have happened that day. And
Mhm.
he's like running, and it's so weird when he's in that dome. When he's running, he's actually his feet are going backwards.
Yeah.
Is something that I noticed.
Mhm.
And he sees like the baby from when he was at the hospital, and he like puts his face near it, and it turns into like a weird floating head, and you see
Mhm.
the flash in the background. So you're like, oh, he's traveling through time. Cool. And then it just fades to black, and you just hear Bruce Wayne's voice saying, so you went back in time. And then it goes
Mhm.
into that scene.
Yeah.
And that's the scene that we've seen in the trailer. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I can change, time. I can save my family. I can save your parents. I really like this conversation.
Mhm.
Because I like the emotion on Bruce's face. That's just like, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Because you can almost seem like you could headcanon like Bruce actually thinking about it for like a split second and then being like, no, that's not how things are supposed to be,
Yeah.
which I really appreciate.
Yeah, that was a really good scene as well, for sure. And then that's when after they have a talk, he's like, I could go back and save my mom. I could save your parents, like it's a really good conversation. And that's when, Flash is kind of defeated at that point. Bruce takes off in his very fancy car, which I know those cars don't exist. They're like prototype cars that they lend out for these movies. And Iris West is there, and she's like, "Hey, Barry," and she's like, "Very expensive friends," and he's like, "Oh, is it Uber executive?" And like, so I will say, if you don't like that kind of quirkiness, you might hate this movie because that
Yeah.
is very much the Flash. Like, there is this scene, like, very at the start of the movie when he's about to run. You see it in the trailers when his visors come down. That's a silly moment there too. But I kind of liked it. I'm like, oh yeah, people would probably freak out for the Flash if they saw him like about to run.
Hey, I see that you have that candy bar. Can
Yeah.
you throw it over to me in the name of justice?
Yeah. So like I was letting all that kind of stuff slide because I'm like, I also have to remember, I'm like, we're building something new.
Yeah.
Like you have to throw out everything you've seen before. You just
Yeah.
have to. Granted, we know Snyder Bros are gonna hang on to some moments in this movie while they bash it. So anything. So like that, there's all these moments, and Iris starts talking to Barry, and there's some funny moments here where he's like, yeah, like he speeds up really fastly to go clean his apartment, and she walks in And she's like, man, this is a lot cleaner than I thought it was going to be. And there's like some quirky jokes where everything explodes out of the closet. And she's like, kind of like, oh, I expected that. And then
Yeah.
she's like, you got a beer or anything like that? That's when we learn he knows how to phase. He
Yeah.
phases through his apartment to get some beers. There's a, kind of a, I don't want to necessarily say it's a slapstick comedy moment, but he opens up the beer and it explodes because he just phased everything, right? So it's going to be extremely under pressure. I thought that was a nice little touch. And they're having a conversation. And while they're having this conversation, Barry's like, oh, he's thinking about the talk he had with Bruce. And Iris doesn't really understand this. She thinks that Barry's just kind of quirky. And he's all like, I could go back. And like, they wouldn't even understand. I could just put like a can of soup there. Cause like, that's what happens in the flashback that we noticed is his dad goes to the store to get a can of soup. And that's when his mom dies. Which one thing to kind of jump forward into the spoiler of this, we never realize how his mom died. They never show that.
Yeah.
So,
but I think there's a reason for it, and I'll get to it later.
Okay. So yeah, very interesting thing there, but that's how we know his dad was caught is because he went to go get a can of soup and it had to be a certain color or whatever. And so Barry's like, I can put the soup in her cart and then it'll never happen. And so he's like, sorry, Iris, I got to go. And like, he leaves his apartment and she's like, but this is, and he's like, oh, I had a nice time. And then he leaves and basically leaves her in his apartment. And it's just like this weird, quirky personality that Barry has that I was like, okay, I'm starting to take a kind of like a liking to it. It was a little abrasive at the start, like I said, because you fucking threw so much at me in the first 10 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, now I'm starting to get to know the character. Okay, cool. Barry runs through time. He starts running to go back. He goes all the way back and he's like, is this good enough? Goes all the way to the supermarket and does what he needs to do, right? He puts the can of soup in his mom's basket, all that kind of shit. Then he starts running back and he's like, all right, is this good enough? And he starts seeing all these memories that he never knew of, like 10th birthday, all this kind of shit. And you're just like, oh, cool. And then he finally gets home and he's all like, he's there. And he's like, I got to get out of my flash suit, right? By the way, the suit. Oh,
that's not what happens. No. So he's running, and as he's running back, this thing comes up. It has purple red eyes, like a hueish, like a purple red hue, purple lightning, and just smashes into Barry while in the Speed Force, and it throws him right in front of his house. And he's like, oh well, let's see. And he's looking around. He sees some old people. He steals some of their clothes. And like runs into the house. He sees his mother. And they're like, "Oh, you're back a little early. Like, what's going on?" And like his dad's like, "Oh, you look really old. What's wrong with you?" Blah blah blah. And he goes into his room. He gets dressed. They're having lunch, I assume. It's the middle of the day. And he's acting very weird compared to what they think of him. And this is where he sees his younger self. He goes, and this is the part that we've seen in the trailers. He tackles him. He goes to the side of the house. They see each other. And then when they're in the room, he finds out that he's 18 years old.
So I think this is also the first shit joke we'll get a bunch of them. Cause like he's eating food. He sees himself and he's like, oh shit. And then his parents are like, whoa, like what? And then he runs to the back door. He's like, I got to shit outside. And I was like, okay, that's kind of funny. And that's when he gets him. And then he goes through all of that stuff. And Barry, I'm not a big fan of the double actor thing much. Like, unless it's Freaky Friday and Lindsay Lohan, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, or Michelle from Full House. But here it kind of worked because Ezra Miller played two very different personalities.
Yes, I think he played the dumb 18-year-old very well. And his attitude and who he is as an individual very much changed. The older one did once he was stuck in time. He had those moments where he would be his quirky self and kind of like anxious and stuff like that throughout the movie. But you could tell immediately when both of them were on screen, you can tell immediately which one was which. And the only problem that I had with that is leaving the movie, I told Juice, I was like, how is it that this movie has been in development for 7 years and it still doesn't look like it's finished? And the reason why I said that is because there are moments, not all the time, but there are moments when you see both Ezras on the screen, one or the other's face just looks a little off. Like you really have to look at it. And it just felt weird to me. There in the Speed Force, when you see the dome or the Coliseum type of like timeline that we will reference throughout this review, that is all CGI. And it isn't very polished, but one criticism that that Juice had when we were getting out of the theater is you can't film all of that.
No, you can't.
Like you can't, like, I think you could have had like a little bit of like a fishbowl type of lens and showed like maybe like little pockets of that type of stuff. But I think you're right. I think it would just be too much.
I also think it was a stylistic thing though too.
Yeah.
Because like, because we'll talk about it at the very end when we see a bunch of shit. Like, you couldn't have filmed all of that stuff too. Like, they're not working on an end game budget here.
What I equate it to, any fans of Man of Steel, when Jor-El is telling the history of the Kryptonians to Clark with the Kryptonian technology, it's like the little beads on the wall and they're like telling a story and stuff. Like it's almost like that, but with just more familiar CGI to what we normally see CGI as.
Yeah, so just to kind of like jump through it a little bit. So Barry basically is telling the other Barry that he's a superhero. And I like how he's young, he's 18, and he kind of like fucks with Barry. And he's like, do the thing again. He's like, no. He's like, no. He's like, Ma! He's like, no. Yeah. And then like Barry builds a fort for him. And he's like, cool. And he's like, now put it back. And then like that's when Barry does it again. And this is when he notices something that kind of makes him a little upset. And this monkey that is a really like sentimental to him is used as a dartboard. And so he's like, what the fuck? And he also sees a bunch of photos with his parents as well. And so at this point, he's all like, you know, yeah, we're going to be superheroes or like whatever. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And he was like, but I got a date tonight. And he's like, with who? He's like, oh, this girl from my econ class. He's like, Iris West. He's like, do we marry her? And then he's all like, and he's like, sweet. He's like, but yeah, I got to do that. And he's like, well, what's tonight? He's like, oh, it starts raining. And he's all like, oh man, that might mess up my date. And he's like, wait, what's the night? Or what's the day? And then like, he's like, oh, it's Tuesday or whatever. I don't know. He says the day.
He says Tuesday. He's like, no, what's the date? And he said, oh, June 27th. Yeah. And June 27th, I believe that's the date.
Yeah, might be the 29th. I don't remember.
Is the day that he gets struck by lightning. He's like, oh, this is the day that we get powers. And he's like, powers? What? He's like, yeah. But if you don't get powers, that means I don't get powers. That means that I'm not even supposed to be here. And we're going to break time. So we have to go get powers. And so he tells them that he's doing an internship at the same job that he had in the beginning of the movie. This is where we get to see a really cool, like, in my opinion, one of the coolest visuals for phasing. He picks up younger Barry and starts to phase. And it zooms in on younger Barry's eye. And then as soon as the eyeball touches the door, it zooms into like the molecular level, and you just see all of the molecules like just phasing between each other and bouncing. I thought that was really cool. Like,
yeah, that was pretty cool.
You could have very easily just seen them go from one side to the other, and it would have been that easy. But basically teaching the audience, the general audience, the people who don't know how this thing works, hey, this is how they're doing it. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It makes sense. Like, this is how that power is working, right? Is essentially what you're doing. So yeah, that was cool. Then they basically get to where they need to be at. There's a funny little joke at that point when they phase again at this one moment. And then Barry's like, all right, I got to set everything up to like exactly how it happened. He was like, I got to open these things because the lightning comes through, it hits this, and you're going to be sitting right here and you're going to get electrocuted. And he's like, electrocuted? He's like, I don't want to get hit by lightning. And he's all like, no, this is how you're going to get powers. He's like, yeah, I don't want to get hit by lightning. And So they're kind of fighting with each other. The lightning comes through and Barry's kind of there. It happens so fast, right? It hits everything. It goes through future Barry and hits young Barry. And they're both on the ground. And he looks over, older Barry looks at fucking young Barry and he's just like, he sees his skin heal. And he's all like, all right, it worked. And at this point is when they're like, alarms go off. Security's like, oh shit, what's going on? And they're like, we got to get out of here. He's picking up Barry because young Barry's like unconscious at this point. So future Barry's picking him up and he's like, all right, we got to get out of here. And he tries to phase. And I thought this was kind of cringy. Part of it was kind of cringy is when he tries to go through the thing and he bumps into it. I'm like, okay, I saw that coming. Like that was kind of lame.
Yeah.
And then he's like, he tries to do it himself and he just runs into the wall. And I was like, okay, that was kind of lame. And then he was like, and then he tries to run.
He gets in that stupid pose that he does as the Flash.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that so future Barry, the Barry that we start off with, still runs the exact same way that you hate him to run.
Yeah.
You notice that?
So here's the thing. His hands move the same way, not his feet.
Okay.
Go back and watch the even in the Snyder cut, his legs like bowled out. Like he like kicks like out and it looks really fucking dumb. But here he does the hand movements, but his feet act like an actual runner. So I can get on board with that. It's just the feet looked extremely stupid in the Justice League movies. So so there's that. But he starts running around like in super slow and it looks so dumb, but it looks like something somebody would do in a YouTube video. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. Like,
and this had the theater laughing.
Yeah. Because he's like, and they let it go for a decent amount of time.
And you just hear the squeaks of the shoes.
Yeah.
That's all you hear.
And it's all squeak, squeak, and he's like going through and he's like, oh no, I'm slow. And that's when the point is like, I forgot how they got out.
I don't think they show it. I'm trying to think.
They just go to his apartment.
Yeah.
So I guess they don't show him get out. Because I can't remember if they do. He just says I'm slow and maybe they're in the apartment. I don't remember. But anyways, they're back in the apartment and this is when young Barry kind of wakes up and he's like, whoa, what's going on? He was all like, dude, like I lost my powers and you have powers. He's like, I got powers? And this happens before like they wake up in his room, right? Like, and all the other people are there. So, he's like, I got powers. And he's like, yes, but he's like, you got to chill. And then he's like, starts running around. He's like, this is cool. He's like jumping on the bed and he's like, dude, you need to chill because, and he's like, and then young Barry does this thing where he does the Speedy Gonzalez like pose, and he's like, "Yes, Speedy Gonzalez," and he's like, "Bye," and then he like, boom, he's
but
gone.
I love that future Barry's like, "Yes, Speedy Gonzalez, I've done it plenty of times."
And then he's gone, and this is when we see. I think this was actually needed because we never got to experience the Flash getting his powers for the first time.
Yes.
So it was nice to see a Barry enjoying his new powers. And he's like going like fucking full speed. He's like laughing, enjoying it. He's stealing pizza, but he doesn't know how to eat it in like real time. So it's like disintegrating. And like there's all of these moments where he's just trying to enjoy it, but then his clothes start catching on fire. And he's like, oh, what the hell? And he's like trying to put himself out. Crashes into something, that's something else into crashing, like all chaos just ensues, and then he's just naked. We see a lot of Ezra Miller ass in this movie. So like you see Ezra Miller and he's there and he's like, oh crap, and then he like takes off and he shows back up at his apartment and he's naked, and Barry's like, yeah, if you would have stayed, I could have told you what happens to your clothes. And then they kind of like start talking about all this stuff, and he's all like, all right, what we're going to need to do, he's trying to explain some stuff to him. He's like, oh yeah, the phasing. He was like, you're not good enough for phasing yet. He's like, and he phases through the floor, is still naked, or like he had a robe on and the robe doesn't go through, but only his body does. And so like he phases through the floor and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he comes back up with a pot, like covering his junk again. He's like, yeah, would you stop doing stuff until I finish talking? And so like, we're getting all this banter back and forth. Really good banter, in my opinion. Yeah. And so, which again, this is very phenomenal for Ezra Miller to do this with himself. Like maybe they had somebody running the lines there. I don't really know, but it worked really well. It never felt off, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really cool. And then I think, is this when they wake up in the apartment and stuff like that? And then that's when he's like, all his friends are there, or
No. So what ends up happening is Barry, the younger Barry, is he ends up like saying like, "Are we always hungry? Are we always tired? Like, what's going on?" He's like, "Yes, like this is just the way things are now." And he like starts to talk to him, and then he falls asleep. He's like,
yes.
"All right, well, I guess we'll just pick this up in the morning."
Yeah.
So from there, he tells him like, "Okay, like this is how things are gonna go," and from there he is, I can't remember from there to when they figure out Zod is coming. Like I
Yeah,
can't.
so I think they go, this is probably when they go to the park to try to test out the suit.
Oh, that's right.
And
That's right.
then we find out about Zod.
We learn about the ring for
Yeah.
the suit, and that's where we see the ring for the first time.
Yeah.
And younger Barry makes again. This is tight. It hurts. You know where it
Yeah.
hurts? The dick. And like
Yeah.
Barry's like, okay, yeah, I understand. I know.
Yeah.
Just put it on.
Yeah.
And he
Then
puts it on.
yeah. And then people were freaking out. And that's when we find out about Zod. We see it on the news. Then we find out something very interesting is that Barry's asking, he's like, oh, so who's this Zod guy? He's like, I knew him. I wasn't able to do anything. And we find out that the original Barry was there the day Zod fucking showed up.
Yeah. So this scene where you see in the flashback where Barry is in Metropolis and you see everybody from the World Engine, like all of the stuff like going up in the air and then smacking down on the ground. And we see the little kid. This scene was actually in a trailer, Juice.
Oh, okay.
And you saw what we thought as the fans watching the trailer. We thought this was the other unexperienced Barry.
Oh.
That's what the theory was. We're like, oh, this is so weird. Like, this is just this other timeline, and that's the other Barry. But our Barry is somewhere trying to like fight Zod. And like Superman, like people still at this point thought Superman was going to be a part of it and all this stuff. But no, to learn this was actually our timeline.
Yeah.
And that's our Barry. Like, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
This showed very deep character development. This proved to him like, hey, I need to be better because I was able to save this kid. I wasn't able to save his father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I thought that was really cool.
Good. Yeah. Definitely fix something. I mean, it doesn't fix anything, but if you were somebody that you didn't watch Snyder's thing, I guess it doesn't really matter because he saved people before that. But like there was that one line like save one, and that's all you got to do, right? But I was like, oh, he technically already saved one. But so kind of you can't really remember any of the movies prior to that. But anyways, so yeah, we learn about Zod, and this is when Barry makes his idea, and he's just like, we got to find the rest of the Justice League because we're Superman. Like he showed up immediately when Zod was there. And so they go back to the apartment. I think this is when we meet the friends. And he's all like, oh, what's that smell? And he's like, oh, that's probably Gary. And there's like this big slothy guy on the couch. And then there's these two people in a bed, which are the coworkers, but they're like, I guess his roommates or friends as well. And they're dating in this. And of course, one's a musician, the guy that's from Vine. He's like playing some music, whatever. The other girl is just like, she sees both of the faces from Barry. And he's like, this is my cousin. Barry, and she's like, I'm hungry. And then so she doesn't even give a fuck. Like none of them give a fuck. They all feel like they're stoners. And they start talking about like time travel or whatever, Back to the Future. And they're like, yeah, Michael J. Fox. He's like, no. And it's the original guy that got cast, right?
Yeah. I can't remember his name, but the original Barry's like, okay, let's look up Victor Stone, Gotham University. Okay, he hasn't turned cyborg yet. Okay, let's look up Aquaman. And they're like, what is that? Like a super mermaid or whatever?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's just a regular old dude with a whole bunch of tattoos. He's just like awesome. And like he ends up calling Thomas Curry.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, can I speak to Arthur? He's like, you want to speak to my dog?
Yeah.
No. Like, Arthur, like your son, like you're married to the Queen of Atlantis, right? And Arthur like turns around, or
Yeah.
Thomas turns around, and it's just this woman in a robe, just like
Yeah.
I can't remember if she's like eating ice cream or whatever, but she's
Yeah,
just
she's
like
like pigging
glued.
out.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
pigging out in the front of the TV, and he's like, yeah, no, and he just like hangs up.
Yeah.
And this is when Barry is starting to freak out. He's like, oh no, I broke time. Like,
Yeah.
there's no metahumans, there's no nothing. And this is when they're having the conversation about Back to the Future,
Mm-hmm.
because the Gary keeps saying the other actor,
Yeah.
and Barry gets frustrated, like super frustrated. He's like, no, why do you keep saying that? Back to the Future famously has Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, is that so? Then why is so and so on my leg? And he like shows him the tattoo. He's like, that tattoo's upside down. He's like, is it? And he like lifts his leg up.
In tidy whities and everything. He's just like, is it? And then he was like, no, it's Michael J. Fox. He's like, you mean the guy from Footloose? And he's like, no, that's Kevin Bacon. And the girl's like, oh, you mean the person from like, what is
Eric Stoltz is the original actor that was originally
like
supposed to be.
Yeah, so he's like, Eric Stoltz is Back to the Future. And it's like, no, it's, freaking Michael J. Fox. He's like, the guy from Footloose? He's like, no, that's Kevin Bacon. He's like, oh, you mean the guy from the, where they're playing volleyball on the beach and like they're flying the planes?
And they're like, oh, yeah, Top Gun.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, that's not how any of this, like, what? And that's when he has his rant. He's like, I need to find Batman. And that's when the girl says, I'm Batman.
Yeah.
And Barry like freezes and he turns around and he's like, what did you just say? And she's like, I'm Bat. And she's like, she burps or whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody's laughing or whatever. He's like, wait, Batman exists? And Gary's like, yeah, like everybody knows he exists. Just nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
And that's when Barry's like, oh, we have to go to that cousin's dinner. Like, let's get going. And this is where we finally get to the Wayne Manor.
Yeah.
And fast forward through all of this, we eventually see Bruce Wayne. A lot of people thought this was fake, but in one of the trailers, you see a long-haired gray person, and I immediately was like, "That's Bruce Wayne," and everybody was in denial. There was a lot of people online that were like, "You cannot do that to Bruce Wayne. Like, he can't have long hair." I'm like, if he's a retired old man, yeah, you can. Like, this is stupid. Why is there even an argument about this? To my surprise, is when they're finally having the conversation about Barry explaining everything, Bruce is the one explaining space-time.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah.
Like, for him to know everything about the multiverse and stuff like that and how it works and how things branch out. And he uses the metaphor of spaghetti, which I thought was hilarious. But it's really surprised me that Bruce Wayne was the caveat for the audience to understand how space-time and the multiverse works.
It was a good analogy. Like, I think what he put out there, because like it's true how they show this plate of spaghetti. He's like, look, there are things that will run parallel, but then there's other stuff that coincides. And these are, I forgot, we know them as fixed points as Doctor Who fans, but I forget what the term they used in here. Conjunctures or some weird shit. But he talks about that. And he's like, but then there's chaos, and he throws spaghetti sauce on there, and then he starts grating cheese, and he's like, "What's the cheese for?" He's like, "That's just a garnish." I think
the analogy is over. It's just a garnish.
And so that's when Barry's all like, "Well, will you help us?" And he's like, "No," and he just kind of leaves, and they're like, "Well, if he's not going to help us, then we'll just go check out all his bat stuff," And so that's when we get into the Bat Cave, and we just start seeing basically a lot of stuff you've seen from the trailers. There's a really emotional moment here when Barry kind of calls out younger Barry. He's like, you don't give a shit about anything. And like, he starts saying all this stuff. Young Barry like comes back and he's like, dude, I've been fucking nice to you this whole time, and you're just being mean. Like, and that's when Barry kind of sits back and like, they have this moment and he's all like, you just don't care about Monkey. And for anybody that we haven't really said this, Barry never tells him that he's trying to save his mom.
Yeah.
So older Barry never tells younger Barry that. So Barry doesn't know why like all these little things are so sentimental to Barry. He thinks he's just kind of being a douche. And Younger Barry kind of gets over it really quickly. He's like, no, man, it's cool. And then he's like, I'm going to go check out some other stuff and let you work. And so, older Barry's trying to search through all these records and stuff, ends up falling asleep. And he actually talks to Bruce at this time. And he's like, look, I know you're listening to me and you're watching me. He's like, yada, yada. He starts kind of telling him everything that's going on, right? Because I think younger Barry falls asleep at this point. And he's kind of telling him, like, he's like, I know what happened to you. I know you lost your parents. Like, I lost mine too, and yada, yada. He wakes up to having all the information he needs because he's looking for Superman. But, we all obviously know he ends up finding Supergirl. But Batman's all like, all right, I'll help you find this chick, but that's it. You know what I mean? And so they go to the black site because I don't think anything crazy happens in between this. He suits up as Batman. We've seen this in the trailer. They fly out to this black site and cool moments there. Batman kind of like, them ejecting from the plane, getting into the black site, finding, I love, they do kind of like, some people are going to love this or not. Like at this point, if you don't like silly kind of comedy, you're going to hate a lot of moments in this movie. Yeah. And, it's the kind of like, oh, we're being sneaky, but something falls down, makes all this noise. All these people are looking at them. And then, of course, like, army comes out. And then that's when we find out, like, Barry slightly, like, he gets shot at, moves older Barry over because he doesn't have his powers anymore. And he's all like, oh, yeah, like, I just moved you a little bit. And then there's all these shots, and he's got to move him, like, really fast.
Yeah, and that's when older Barry was like, wait, what did you just do? He's like, I moved you, but only a short distance. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, older Barry projectile vomits like green shit. Yeah. And we find out, if you looked at everything before this, older Barry never moved anything dramatic. Yeah. And he did tell younger Barry, you can't move people at super speed. It's just it's gonna fuck them up. And this is, we learn the consequence of that. Yeah.
It makes sense onto why he didn't capture that girl at the start. He tied the hose around her.
Yeah. So and the same thing with all of the babies. He never moved them. He only like pinched their clothing and like kind of guided them. He never dramatically pushed them or moved them.
Yeah, because if anybody's curious about that, scientifically, you would break people in half. Yeah. So why Barry doesn't get broken in half there, you kind of just got to leave it up to comic book logic, but they at least showed a consequence to it. Yeah. He projectile vomited everywhere.
But this is where we see like the badass, like Batman moment where we see Bruce come down fighting a whole lot. I actually really dug this. Yeah. I was kind of curious, like the stuff that we had seen via the trailer was good, but I needed to see the full scene to really see how Andy was really capturing the badassery of Batman, Yeah. I dug it. For Keaton's Batman, the way that he moved, it felt like Keaton's Batman, but with more modern movement and everything else. It wasn't as stiff, but there was still a stiffness to him to kind of show, hey, he is the Keaton Batman. He doesn't have a whole lot of mobility. But I still thought it was good.
Yeah. He does have a good line in here where he's like, this is going to hurt. And because it's like the first time he's done it in years, Yeah. So he goes down there, beats the shit out of everybody. Great action. Showed he was Batman. Like he was Batman. That was awesome. And then they open up the things. They open up the case for Supergirl. There's a little bit of like funny moments between Flash and Batman there. And at no point in this is Keaton's Batman funny, if I think. Like, I don't think he does anything that's funny. And so, which is good, because again, I was worried about what he did with Affleck at the start of the movie, where he had the lasso of truth moment. Because I'm like, you don't make Batman funny. Like, it's just not what you do. But I let it slide because of that. But Keaton was never popping jokes or anything like that. He did say some classic lines that people might find cringe, just because they are classic. But I think people that know Keaton will be like, fuck yeah, Yeah. So yeah, they get Wonder Woman. They get Supergirl. She's all beat up in this like what Barry calls a scrotum. More dick jokes. And he ends up they end up getting her out there like, oh, we got to get out of here. Actually, I take back what I just said. There was one Batman joke that was kind of logical, is what he was trying to do. Is they need to get out of there, so he needs to put a bomb at the bottom of this elevator. and he pulls out a measuring tape, and he's like, he doesn't, and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, I need to know your weights. And because he needs to calculate how bad the explosion needs to be. And he's like, oh, this is plus her, like this is how much it's gonna be. He's like, all right. And he sets a leveler, and it explodes this thing, and they fly out to the top. And this is the start of the scene that everybody's kind of seen in the trailers, where they're out on top of the like Antarctic like base or whatever, and Supergirl gets stuff. Now, one thing I think is very interesting that I don't know if we're supposed to believe that Keaton knew what was going to happen, because maybe he knew the experiments that were going on and he just didn't do anything about it. Or if we were supposed to believe that he was just about to get ready to fight with berries, and the plane was going to come up and hopefully help them at the end, and she was just a pleasant surprise.
I think that that's the way it's supposed to go, is that he didn't know anything about her. I retract that, because he's the one that gives Barry the information.
Yeah. So he might have the info on her.
I think that he knows very minimal, though. I don't think he would have known exactly, other than the fact that, like, okay, Barry told me that this person exists and that she has laser eyes, or that he, because they still think it's Clark, has laser eyes and super strength and whatever. Because the joke that Keaton does have in when they're still talking about the multiverse and everything else in their kitchen, he's like, don't you think Superman is a little on the nose? He's like, yeah, but you call yourself Batman. He's like, yeah, but I'm not super Batman. You know? That's the one joke, but it's a joke as Bruce Wayne, not as Batman. That's the big difference. But in this scene, I genuinely think he's going off of the whim that, okay, this Barry says this person is who they say they are, and I'm just gonna try to save these two idiots that got me into this mess. Like, I think that Kara was a complete surprise to them.
Yeah. And so, of course, she beats everybody's ass, and then she collapses because she's just not used to being out. And so they get her back to the manor. She ends up waking up. That's where the scene we've seen in the trailer, where they're like, I'm Barry, or we're Barry. And they kind of like talk about the symbol and all that jazz. And he's like, yeah, take her up to the roof or whatever. She gets in her suit. She gets her powers. And she's basically like, oh, yeah, fuck you guys. Like, y'all had me tied up. Like, I'm going to go. I don't need to protect humanity. And so she goes. She finds Zod. Zod starts fucking everything up, and she comes back to Barry, essentially like, oh, well, she ran off on us, so I need to become Flash again. And that's when he gets the idea of like, let's recreate this. And I find it funny that like Bruce was like, you need my help? Like, ready to do something crazy to help this guy get his powers. And at this point too is when he reveals, like, he was like, the kid doesn't know, does he, that like your mom's dead? And he's like, no. But we find out that Barry was eating food under the cave, and like he heard the whole conversation. So he's a little worried now that Barry is going to do something insane to try to, become the Flash again. So we see this whole thing. He does get electrocuted once. It doesn't work. And they try to do it again. And it doesn't, like, the whole power system went down. Supergirl shows up, takes him up to the sky to get electrocuted. And then he does eventually get his powers back. And that's when we see a montage of, younger Barry making a suit out of all the Batman stuff. There was a moment when they did get back where, I don't know what you thought about this, when Michael Keaton is like fixing his wounds and he kind of smirks that, like, I don't know if he's just like happy being Batman again, which, you could have a conversation of being, I was like, oh, does Batman like the violence? Does Batman like this? That conversation can be had if you want to, but I just got to say, Michael Keaton was fantastic in this.
Yeah, I think he did a great job being the Batman that he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But when Kara comes back, she's like, I will help you guys. She takes Barry into the sky. So it was Barry, like everybody thought. It was not Henry Cavill. Like so many others thought for some reason.
Mm-hmm. It was Kara, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. They... No. The theory was, for some reason, they thought Kara was lifting up Henry Cavill into the sky. Yeah,
that's so dumb. Okay.
Yeah. But you just see a huge flash of light
Yeah.
Like it covers the entire screen, and the next thing you know, you just see her in the cave placing Barry down. And this is where younger Barry is like, he's supposed to heal, right? He's supposed to heal. Like it's supposed to. It worked, right? It worked, right? And it takes a little bit. He touches older Barry, and you see like a small spark, and that's when you finally see like his body healing. He's like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like he doesn't say fuck, but he's like, yeah. And then Barry wakes up. He's like, you scared the shit out of me, bro. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was funny. But this is when you see younger Barry uh fixing a suit of his own. Because when when the older Barry was about to get struck by lightning, Bruce threw a suit to him.
Yeah.
He's like, it's an insulated suit, so it won't hurt you. And Barry's like, the whole point is to get hurt. The whole point is get struck by lightning. But younger Barry keeps hold of that suit. It's an old Batman suit, like a rubber Batman suit. So like you see him like chiseling some things out. He's like painting it red, he's painting it yellow, and it becomes the suit that everybody has memed about for so long now, that we've seen being leaked and everything else. And like there's like the funny, and I think this is the thing that a lot of people will say, quote unquote, was stolen from the MCU. There's a lot of moments in comedic films where like the score stops and the only thing that you hear is whatever the object of the joke is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. You see younger Barry with a chisel just like cutting off the bat ears of one of the cows. And a lot of people were laughing at that moment.
Yeah.
It was really funny for some people. When older Barry finally wakes up, he has the suit on and he gives older Barry the ring back. He suits up and they're like, so we're this new Justice League, right? That's what you called us? And he's like, well, I guess kind of. We're just missing a god, a demigod.
Yeah.
And we could really use a Batman.
Yeah.
And that's when Keaton was like, well, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
Yeah. And this goes to the final act of the movie, essentially, where it's the big battle that you've probably seen a lot of stuff from. We don't need to go into that too much, except for the big important things is two main characters die. And that puts us into our big thing. So Kara gets her ass beat every single time. Like she does do some ass kicking though, which is really cool, because she finds out Kal-El was killed by Zod. And so she beats the shit out of Zod. She has Zod basically dead to rights, but she hesitates a little bit and he stabs her. And that's when they take her lifeblood. And so she's dead. Then Bruce tries to sacrifice himself, which that was really cool. We've always talked about sacrificing. I just don't like that it didn't do anything, because he like sacrificed himself into a shield and it did nothing. And, you know, this is when the Barrys are like, we can go back in time. We just got to go back just a little bit to save them. So they go back in time and they're like, we both know what we need to correct, right? And they're like, yeah. Barry, older Barry corrects Bruce not shooting missiles because it's a force field. And he's all like, yeah. He was like, all right. And he just said nonchalantly, he's like, okay. And he just like doesn't do it. And he's like, but that guy's not bulletproof. And he shoots missiles at one of the Zod enemies. And while Barry's trying to save Kara, but he fails. She dies again. They do a double team, which is kind of cool for a little bit against Zod, but she still ends up dying. And then this was really cool, where Batman was fighting a more powerful villain than himself, but doing it very strategically. And
I thought this was really fun.
Yeah.
Keaton's Batman was like crawling all over the very tall, like bulky Kryptonian.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name for the life of me. But he kept on planting bombs on his chest, on his back, on his head. And this entire time you just see Batman is crawling like a freaking spider all around.
Well, he's using his grappling hook around him, I think, to like get faster leverage. And every time and we learned this prior, which this is a good thing. While if people think that joke was stupid when he pulled out the measuring tape for the weight, he's adjusting his bombs. So he knows how powerful they need to be. So I think he's testing them in this moment. Like, that's not strong enough. That's not strong enough. Then he puts a really strong one on the back of this guy's head and it blows up.
Yeah. And
like that knocks him out.
He just falls.
Yeah.
But like it was wearing out Bruce so much, because the one thing that when it does blow up, he throws Bruce over his head and Bruce just flies and just lands hard on the ground.
Yeah.
Like this inevitably, like Bruce gets up from it, but he's
Mm-hmm.
bleeding from the mouth. Barry like runs to him. He collapses. He's like, we didn't get you out, did we? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're still gonna die. He's like, no, like I made it. Like he's
Yeah.
saying like you got me to get out of my house. Like I'm Batman again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's a really cool moment. But Feora comes and attacks both Barrys at that point.
Yeah.
And another like explosion happens or something with either the lightning that they are causing. Like there's a cool moment where like the younger Barry, still very unexperienced,
Mm-hmm.
like he's trying to get the leg up on a lot of these Kryptonians because he's like, oh, they're fast. Barry's like, no, but we're faster, kind of giving him encouragement.
Yeah.
And he does like this weird like Hadouken type of thing with his fingers to conduct electricity to like fire at these enemies,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing so, Feora's armor just kind of explodes, and a piece of her armor gets fucking just caught into Barry's arm.
Yeah.
And older Barry is like, oh shit, like just face through it. Like, I can help you. He's like, no, there's no time. We got to go back. We got to save them. And this becomes like a reoccurring thing, but we go from the perspective of the older Barry because they're in the Speed Force. And this is where older Barry is starting to realize like, oh shit, this is what Bruce was talking about. Like,
yeah.
This is a fixed point. Like there's no changing this.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger Barry just keeps going back and back and back. And like the Coliseum-esque setting for the Speed Force, you see every single time the younger Barry is failing and failing and failing. And every single time the younger Barry's coming back, he has like a new piece of shrapnel on him.
Yeah.
And eventually older Barry stops him, like grabs him, and younger Barry's like about to like freaking slice him. He's like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. Like he's on edge because he's frustrated that he can't save Bruce and Kara.
Yeah.
And this is where older Barry's like, this is a fixed point. And this is where older Barry finds out mom dying is a fixed point. And this is where the younger Barry reveals that he knew, like, mom's gonna die and I'm not gonna let that happen. And we can fix everything in it and nobody needs to die again. But this is where we see I think it's younger Barry goes one more time, and then as he is gone, this entity that we saw at the very beginning of the movie comes up out of nowhere and is fighting Flash. And in the middle of fighting Flash, that's when the younger Barry comes in. He's like, oh, who the fuck are you? Like, what the hell's going on? And this is where even more chaos ensues, because we see like the fabric of time is starting to like break. Yeah. When the younger Barry attacks this monster thing, because it's all like solidified in rock or whatever, the face breaks open and we realize it's a much older Barry Allen. Like it's a much older Ezra. He's gray. And this is where we start to see the fabric of time break. And Juice, I want you to break down these worlds that we see in this multiverse.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. Because I think the conversation here, it happens to the idea. He's like, how long have you been doing this? And he's like, I've been doing like time. He like talks about time. Essentially, like it seems like he's been doing it for like 1,000,000 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to save this thing. That's why he looks so old. And so what happens is when the fabric of time is breaking, there's this like portal that you can see like in this Coliseum. There's like a window essentially that's opened. And you see these like what I want to say are planets or orbs. But instead of them being planets, it's like rows and rows of different timelines or like different like timelines of characters. So like there is one of Adam West's Batman. Like you see Adam West Batman, but every line, the way I viewed it is every column was slight different iteration of that Batman. You know what I mean? But they all kind of
Okay,
look
yeah,
the
yeah,
same.
yeah.
That's how I envisioned it. Because I was like, why else would you have columns? You know?
Well, the first world that we see though
Mhm.
is George Reeves' Superman.
Yes, yes. With a
So
Supergirl.
with no, the
No.
black and white Superman first. It's the George Reeves Superman,
Oh, okay, yeah.
which was really interesting because I don't know if you noticed this.
Mhm.
It goes into his dome and we see the speedster of his world.
Yeah. Yeah,
Did you
yeah, yeah.
recognize that? Did you recognize that
Yeah, Jay
actor?
Garrick. Yeah, yeah. That's when I had turned. I was like, "Oh shit." Yeah.
So it wasn't John Wesley Shipp, Jay
No.
Garrick. It
Mhm.
was the Jay Garrick that like ended up being freaking Zoom
Yeah.
in the Flash, the CW Flash.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that. So,
That's the same Jay Garrick.
oh, I
Like
didn't notice that. So,
he
that's pretty
had
crazy.
that's wild that like they actually got that actor
Yeah.
uh to be in the movie.
Yeah, I
That
didn't pick
I
up on
thought was
that.
really
I thought it
yeah.
was just Jay Garrick. I didn't pay attention to who it was.
Yeah, if you
Uh,
look at the face, it was definitely him.
okay. So that's nuts. And then yeah, we just start seeing a bunch, and I mean a bunch of Supermen. Like it is insane. So we do see the classic one. I'm forgetting his name right now.
Christopher Reeves.
Christopher Reeves. Then a Supergirl, blonde Supergirl, which I believe she's been in the movies, right?
Yeah, so that is the original Supergirl from the movie Supergirl.
Yeah.
She actually has a reoccurring cameo in the Supergirl TV show. She
Okay.
plays their mom. Um, and you see Christopher Reeves and her standing side by side, and it's really cool because each one of these cameos somewhat acknowledge like
Yeah.
the fact that Barry, like all of these berries are like fucking with time. They actually
Mhm.
look out into that universe or whatever. Uh, but the very next one probably had you even more surprised. The next,
Yeah. So did you know this before they showed the face? Or
no.
no? Because like some people were like, like 'cause when they saw the monster he was fighting.
So the monster is what got me to know who it was though.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought because it seemed like you knew.
Because
So,
I saw it and I audibly said no way.
mhm.
And when they actually showed the face of who it was,
Yeah.
that's when the entire crowd was like, "Oh
Yeah,
shit!"
so there's a Superman. You see his back first, and he's like laser beaming this big insect type of character. And then like it turns around, he has long hair, and it's fucking Nicolas Cage. And for anybody that doesn't know this, he was supposed to be Superman at one point with Tim Burton, and that movie
Yeah.
just never got made. And
So
so you can search those photos up online if you want to see them. But
so the movie was written by Kevin Smith.
oh wow, I didn't know that.
So in Kevin Smith's like idea
Hmm.
was that he was going to be fighting a giant robot spider.
Oh, okay.
And that's what he's fighting in the movie. So when
Okay.
I saw the giant spider, I saw the long hair and I saw the giant spider. I was like, no fucking way. They did not do that.
Hmm.
And when the camera turns, it's so cool because visually, you like you said, it starts off behind Superman. You see the mechanical spider. He does the heat vision. And like as the smoke clears, the camera's turning onto his face.
Hmm.
And then the smoke clears and you see it's Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And it's with the exact same suit that he was supposed to wear in
Hmm.
the movie and everything.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
Yeah. All of these Supermen, ladies and gentlemen, had the trunks. So just FYI, if you're a trunks hater, and they look good. I thought they looked good on screen.
Yeah.
But granted, this was all like CGI big time. I don't know how it would look with the practical suit, but still, I think Superman trunks owns. So anyways, getting a bunch of this, we do get Henry Cavill in this movie. It is I don't know if it's during this moment exactly, but there was a moment when you see him breaking through the Flash, like when he was fighting Flash originally, where it's like muscular,
Yeah.
Henry Cavill. We do see a lot of Aquaman and stuff in there too, if I'm not mistaken, just randomly and Wonder Woman, or it might be Batman and Wonder Woman. I might be getting it confused. But like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. We do see, like I said, Batman 66. And there's just a lot. I'm pretty sure we missed a lot too. Like there's got to
Yeah.
be other stuff that we missed. But all of these worlds are just different types of like Batman and different types of like Superman and all this kind of stuff. And they start kind of colliding. And like it's all kind of like coming together. Everything's kind of disintegrating. And I just want to say, I believe this other Flash is referred to as Dark Flash in this movie. They never say it, but I think that's kind of what it's referred to as. So Dark Flash is like, the one thing I've noticed, the one thing I've never been able to fix is you are like the anomaly here. Like you're the problem. And so essentially, like for me to fix everything, for me to save everybody, you need to die. And so Dark Flash is about to kill older Barry when younger Barry turns around and takes the dive for him. Like he takes the fucking blade. And essentially Dark Flash killed himself because that's who he is. And so he disintegrates and everything kind of just like Barry's like, I gotta get out of here. And I don't really remember what happens. Like, does everything just fix itself, or I forget what happened?
So what ends up happening is he essentially like it's like, I got to fix things correctly. So you see him start to run again. You actually see younger Barry like start to disintegrate, like turn into dust, and you see him at the supermarket, and he changes into random clothes again. And he kind of waits out, and he sees himself as the Flash put the tomato sauce in the cart, and then he sees himself run off. And this is when he goes and he is like catching a conversation with his mom, essentially. It's like, oh yeah, I really love that cereal. They kind of have a back and forth, and he starts to break down. And she's like, I know I'm a complete stranger, but do you need a hug? And they embrace or whatever. He when they're done hugging, like she puts her hand on his face, and that's when he goes into super speed, grabs the soup or the tomato sauce, and goes back in the position and says, bye mom, I love you, I love you more, I love you first. That was like the thing that they had together. Goes back into normal time, and he puts the tomato sauce back where it's supposed to be, and then he kind of just waits there for a second. And this is when he goes back to his normal time. Because
so one thing we didn't talk about at all, and it makes a huge difference, is at the start of the movie is his dad. He gets footage of his dad that would have been to fix his alibi, where he's at this place to buy the tomato soup, but his dad never looks up at the camera, and so that's why they can't make him go free. So what Barry does is right when he puts this tomato soup there, he looks up and he sees the camera. And so what I thought was going to happen was like, oh, Barry's going to adjust the camera somehow, and it's going to show his dad in a clearer vision. What he actually did, and we find this out because he says it and they don't show it, is it cuts straight back, like Clay said, it cuts straight back to normal time, and he's like late to get to his dad's hearing. And they show the video. They're like, we fixed it up and yada, yada. And you can clearly see his dad looks up and his face is there. And everybody's like, oh, shit. Like, oh, my God, this evidence clears him of like the yada, yada, yada. And everybody's like freaking out. And like Barry goes outside. His dad, of course, they have a loving embrace kind of. And the reporters want to talk to Barry. And they're like, so Barry, can you explain what happened? He's like, yeah, the tomato soup was on the wrong shelf. So we just moved the things got moved from one shelf to the other shelf. And that's why he looked up. And so basically what you found out is because in the story, and a lot of people might be like, that's a stupid thing. But whether you think it's stupid or not, they laid it out for you to make sense. Because while he's talking to his mom when he was a child, his mom's all like the blue can, not the green one, or vice versa. One of those. So what Barry did was he moved all of the green cans to the top shelf and all the blue ones to the bottom, forcing his dad to look up to get the right one.
Yeah.
And so it's that little thing that makes it make sense. And so from there on out, he gets out. Iris is all like, you should ask me out. And he's like, yeah, I'll ask you out. And then, that's kind of what happens. And then he gets a phone call from somebody, and it's Bruce Wayne. And he's all like, oh, Bruce, you're here. He's like, yeah, I'm pulling up right now. And he's like, yeah, my dad, got out or whatever. And so he's like, yeah, I'm about to find out. Bruce gets out. And I was like really shocked here because we've heard about this before, what actually happens. But I was like, because we also heard that they weren't showing the last like 20 minutes to the audience, right? I was like, there's no way they're gonna give us the new Batman in this movie, is there? I had a little inkling. I was like, that would be fucking crazy. And he's all like, all right, yeah. He's like, I'm just here. Somebody's getting out of the car, the same car that Ben Affleck was driving earlier in the thing, gets out. It's fucking George Clooney.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this on the podcast before about the possibility of George Clooney being Batman in this. I never thought it would be in this scenario. I thought it would be like when the worlds were colliding. You know, he'd be in the bat suit and he'd be like, "I'm Batman." You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting this, and even Barry's like, "Who the fuck is that?"
He actually says, "Who the fuck is that?"
Literally uses the word "fuck," and he's all like. He's like, oh, they're talking. He's like, but you're Bruce Wayne. He's like, yeah. He's like, how are you Batman or something?
No. He says he's trying to get it all out, and he's like, you're not Batman. And George Clooney's Bruce Wayne is like, are you kidding me right now? Like, are you really gonna out me in public right now? That's basically he says, are you serious? And then it cuts. The movie ends. Right there. A joke that we didn't really touch up on is Barry loses a tooth. In the other separate timeline, and he glues it. It falls out at the very end, and it literally fades to black on his like freaking missing tooth, which I thought was hilarious. But the credits roll. There's only one credit scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the very end of the movie, and we see it's Barry with Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
And he's explaining, he's like, yeah, they were all different, but they're all Bruce Wayne. But like, I'm the same, and you're the same in every other universe or every timeline or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they've established that Batman is different in every timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Barry is the same in every timeline. And Arthur is the same in every timeline.
Yeah.
They've established that in this DCEU. I'm going to go ahead and say that right there, because I think there's going to be a lot of confusion when the DCU starts. And I think you can have a little bit of leeway with what the DCEU rules are and what the DCU rules are, for me personally.
Yeah, so when this movie ended, I told Clay, I was like, I have more questions than answers now. Because, and we're going to be talking about this right now in James Gunn's new podcast, because this podcast ain't over yet, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, the Arthur Curry thing, or the Aquaman thing at the very end was it was a great scene. Even if Aquaman flops, I think Jason Momoa should stay on as Aquaman. I think he's a great Aquaman. As much as he wants to be Lobo, I think Aquaman should be Jason Momoa. But with that, just keep in mind, everybody, what happened there. Because essentially, as they said in this end credit scene, Barry looks the same, Aquaman looks the same. So even in the DCU, you would expect them to be the same. And we're going to touch on this because there's a lot of shit we need to talk about in regards to what James Gunn has said. Because I, at the moment, am very confused and might be a little upset with what he's saying. But overall, with The Flash, I enjoyed it. I think I actually enjoy it more now that we just talked about it, which is interesting. I would be down to go see it again. I would probably let it die down a little bit. Past this weekend, sometime midweek next week, if anything, at the earliest. But I would definitely be down to watch it again because I'm pretty sure there's stuff I've missed. And now that I know what to expect from it, now I can just enjoy it as a second viewing. But I enjoyed the movie. I will say at the start, I was like, oh man, people are going to hate this part. People are going to hate that part. And I hate having to think about content like that. I just want to be able to enjoy it. It's one of the reasons why I stopped reviewing a lot of things too, because I just want to get back to where I enjoy shit. But I want to hopefully get to one day where I'm not thinking about what fucking people care about a movie, because like, I just don't like hearing about the bitching. And maybe I just got to get off social media and not care anymore. Would be the biggest thing, but not the easiest thing to do when you have a job that requires social media. So,
well, before we move on to this podcast that Gunn was on, I do have to ask you, because a friend of mine who went to go see the screening the week prior brought up a really good point. So how do you feel about Keaton's ultimate like fate is dying?
We all die.
Well, yeah, we all die, but like I asked him, I was like, I said, I wonder what the reception will be of this movie. He said, it's just okay. I hate what they did to Keaton. I mean, he's dead. And Supergirl literally did nothing. That was his comments over this movie. Like he's a big Keaton fan, clearly. But I think that a lot of these people don't realize like he's not going to be in Batgirl anymore. He's not going to have multi films. I think this is his last film as Batman.
Yeah, and he got a swan song. What's wrong with that? I don't have a problem with the way they went out. And also, you could make the saying that Supergirl didn't do anything, but what did you want her to do? She's not even out of the fucking scrotum for 24 hours. So like, I don't know did they want her to be Superman? She looked cool. She did cool shit, but this was a timeline very fucked up, and this was a world that was supposed to die. Like, not every superhero movie is going to have a happy ending. I mean, Infinity War showed everybody that, right? Granted, it turned into a happy ending.
If the world hadn't been fucked up by Barry, the world would have just ended.
Yeah. Also, you would have never got to see Keaton and Supergirl in the first place.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't mind. I actually think they made Keaton look way better than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
Like, he was great as Batman, like modern day Batman. Yeah. Like, I could safely say that if he was going to continue being the Batman in the DCEU, I probably would have been okay with it after seeing this film. Because he was doing cool shit. He was doing very Batman-y shit. The Batwing, it having a spinning cockpit was awesome. I thought that was very smart. Yeah, very smart. And that's like, I don't know. I'm assuming that Andy Muschietti, if he is confirmed to be doing Batman, he'll use a lot of the same people that worked on this crew to do the gadgets and stuff for Batman. I am have a lot of confidence in him. Now, granted, he did say like, oh, I wouldn't be able to, like, I'll talk to how I'll handle stuff in the future. With, I can't talk about that yet, is what he said. Maybe he'll have different iterations of his own Batman, because he is dealing with the Keaton Batman here, and like he's essentially dealing with two Batmans he had no control over, right? He never got to create his own Batman. I'm kind of hoping that's how Christina Hudson will write it as well. Like, I'm hoping he'll be like, this is going to be my Batman. This is how you need to write it. Because I will say the only thing that I would criticize her about is I just don't like the lasso thing. I just don't want Batman to be funny. That's the one thing. I don't need him. If you want to make Bruce Wayne have some quirky jokes, sure, why not? Not Batman. Batman always serious. Because, another thing is Keaton's Batman actually had another thing that we didn't talk on, is when they're trying to escape, he does the like move, bitch, like the like move. Like he tries to scare somebody. I also thought the scientist looked like he was jacking off when he was trying.
When he was trying to grab the gun.
Yeah, it looked like he was trying to grab something for the longest time, and it was around his waist. It looked like he was trying to jack off because Batman was there. So I was like, they could have done something better there, but it is what it is. But yeah, he tried to like scare this guy, like move, bitch, and the guy was just like, I mean, he's Russian. He's like, I'm scared of you, bitch. Like Putin's my boss. Like, you think I'm scared of you? So like, pretty crazy shit there. But I don't need Batman to be funny. Like, and especially if you're going to be doing Brave and the Bold, leave that to everybody else but Batman. Nightwing can be funny. I don't think Damian should be funny, but if you're going to have Tim be in there, let him be funny. Definitely let Red Hood have a joke here or there. I do feel like DC, the way they're going to handle Red Hood is they're going to make him Deadpool. I feel like that's what they're going to do, and that's not going to be great. But like, yeah, I don't know. James Gunn did say Deadpool is his favorite MCU movie or Marvel movie. So interesting. But he also says that Into the Spider-Verse is the greatest movie ever. Well, superhero wise. Yeah. So, but anyways, so yeah, overall, I would watch the movie again. I would recommend it. But
out of
I know
10, how much? 1 out of 10.
7.5.
Okay, we're on the same page. Again, it's not the greatest, and
No.
again, 7.5 is not a bad movie. It
No.
is a good movie.
Yeah.
So
If I watch it again, I think it'd probably bump to an 8, maybe. It's a possibility. Or it could be bumped to a 7. So I think 7.5 is solid.
Yeah.
Because to get 9 or 10, like I have to be walking out of there thinking it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
I don't even, and I walked out thinking Spider-Verse was amazing. I don't know if I'd give it a 10 though.
I don't think I would give Spider-Verse a 10 either.
Yeah. And it was something that, like, I don't know if that's why I was kind of curious about the guy that was sitting in front of us, right? The reviewer guy. Because at the start, I thought he was going to be a grumpy old dude because he was an older guy. He's definitely older than us. And so probably like maybe mid 40s to early 50s, maybe. And he was talking about, like, he was talking to this dad and son, and they're like, "Oh, did y'all see Spider-Verse?" And he was like, "It had its problems." And I was all like, "What?" I was like, "Hold up." I was like, "What are these problems?" And one of the problems was that he was like, he just doesn't really, his spider sense just disappears. And I'm like, why does that fucking matter? That's what you're going to fixate on? That his spider sense doesn't show up a couple of fucking times? How would Spider-Man ever get hit if he always had it working 100% of the time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think, look, I nitpick about a lot of shit. But usually I try to make sense of it. You know, that one, I'm like, to talk shit about Spider-Verse, that is what you're going to pick on. I thought that was kind of silly. So I was like, this guy's going to hate this movie. I thought he was probably going to think the intro was fucking stupid, all this shit. First thing he says that I heard was, he was like, I think James Gunn's DCU is going to be completely different or completely new or something like that. And he seemed to enjoy it, though. He seemed to enjoy the movie. So I'm like, oh, maybe he isn't a grumpy old man. But yeah, I just thought that was relatively interesting. I was like, oh, you're gonna hate on Spider-Verse, bro. That movie was great. But yeah, I don't think what else, like, I think I hit on everything else that I was talking about. I think I said Ezra Miller won me over by the end of this movie. I think they did Batman justice besides the little bit of comedy that they tried to do. But yeah, I was worried. I didn't like the bat voice though. That would be the one thing.
Affleck, yeah.
Yeah, it would be the one thing I would definitely disagree with. They should have just kept it to the modulated voice. But other than that, man, I would definitely watch this movie again. I would recommend it. But I know people are going to bitch. Yeah, if Young's listening to this podcast, I know his ass is going to bitch about the CGI. And I'll just tell you right now, I'm going to ignore you. Because, like, it is what I think. Part of it is a stylistic choice. Part of it is. I think the Dome Coliseum thing, that was stylistic. I think that's what they were going for. It wasn't something they were going to film every fucking scene for. I mean, half of those people that were in the Worlds Colliding scene, they're not even alive anymore. So like, they had to do CGI, So I think I'd rather them honor those people that way than not honor them at all. So it is what it is. And also, like, I'm pretty sure it's way cheaper to pay Nicolas Cage for that kind of thing than having him come in. So, it is what it is. Do they even need to pay for him for that, or do they just own that? Like,
no,
like,
I think to use his face, they would need to pay him.
Yeah. So, anyways, go check out The Flash. Let us know what you thought in the comments if you are listening to this and you've already seen it. But before this podcast ends, we need to talk about a podcast that James Gunn was on, because a lot of people on Twitter are already talking about this, because he uses some confusing words. Now, Clay hasn't listened to this podcast yet. He was going to listen to it later today, but I kind of said, like, yo, we can record today, to be honest. And so he hasn't been able to listen to it. But the big things from this, as when James Gunn is talking on this Michael Rosenbaum podcast, they do talk about DCU, him being the studio exec, and like how he became that. But he says some random quotes. And this is what got everybody up in arms. He says that Blue Beetle is the first DCU character. Then he says Superman Legacy is the first DCU movie, but Creature Commandos is the first DCU project. Now, Clay, I don't know if you want to read what you posted in Discord, because I kind of went against it.
Yeah, so I said, let me actually bring it up here. I said, that seems simple enough. What I take it as Blue Beetle is the only character that will be seen as transferring from the DCU or the DCEU to the DCU. Creature Commandos will be the first product that we see from the DCU. And Superman will be the first theatrical experience that we will have from the DCU.
Yeah. So I will dive into that a little bit, but this is really confusing people on Twitter because they're like, that doesn't make sense because Blue Beetle is a movie and a film, is it not? And so that's where people are. Like, they're just like, that doesn't make sense. So are you saying that whatever happens in his movie doesn't matter? And that's what people have been harked on since this release, right? Everybody thought that Shazam all the way to Aquaman, none of these movies fucking matter. That's how it's been. And so people were worried about that. So now I had responded to Clay. I was like, simple to you isn't simple to the GA, Clay. I was like, look at Gunn's comments. Look at Gunn's comments or Scooper's post. This is under like different Scoopers and all this shit that are talking about this right now. I said, go look at that. Also, I think you're wrong about Blue Beetle. Gunn in the podcast confirms that Peacemaker is happening after Superman along with Waller. So unless they're recasting everybody in those shows, Blue Beetle being the first person to come over is just factually wrong.
But we don't know that. You can't say that for sure.
I know.
Gunn knows that for sure.
He does, but do you think just like, because like, yes, anything is possible, right? Until it's factually proven.
Yeah.
Logically, with the success of Peacemaker, do you think they're recasting Peacemaker?
No.
Exactly. There are certain things, yes, anything is possible. The MCU could shut down today. Is it going to happen? Fucking no. It is the 0.0001% chance that it would shut down today for whatever reason. But it could happen. So we're thinking in a logical sense here. So, and you ain't replacing fucking Viola Davis. You ain't getting another woman to take that part that's going to do it better, in my opinion. So she's going to be Waller. She's getting her own show. So the Blue Beetle comment doesn't make sense, in my opinion. And again, Creature Commandos being the first product. I understand where you're coming from, Clay. 100%. Because that's how I thought of it. But I'm like, I'm not the GA, you know? The GA doesn't fucking cover a podcast about Batman every week. You know what I mean? Like, we are different than the GA. So like, it's confusing a lot of people. And I'm like, this is a bad look for James Gunn. And before this podcast started, I was like, Clay, we need to go back and watch the DC slate because you thought he was saying something different. I was like, no. I was like, this is how he said it. And if I'm not mistaken, the quote is that Flash resets the DC universe. That is what he says.
Yeah.
Then it's going to go into, that is going to lead into Blue Beetle, then which will lead into Aquaman, which starts off our next projects. That makes it seem like everything is connected.
Yes.
Yeah. So this new comments from Gunn is fucking confusing. And to tie, remember what we said, we were going to tie things to the Flash movie.
The review. Yeah.
If Flash's timeline is the new timeline, because he just told Jason Momoa, aka Aquaman, that they're the same people in every universe. That means Aquaman's going to continue, meaning Aquaman's movie has to be part of the new DCU, which would make sense with what just happened. How do you explain George Clooney as Batman?
Here's the question. Here's a question to you. It's mental gymnastics. I understand this. Mm-hmm. But what did I say on the last podcast?
I don't know.
I said there's two ways that I need the Flash to end.
Mm-hmm.
Either one, Barry is stuck in a time in the time force, Speed Force, not Time Force, Jesus, in the Speed Force, or he's stuck in another timeline.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't his timeline.
So we're gonna get another Flash movie where he goes back to another timeline?
No, I think that he figures it out for the fact that, like, okay, you're not my Batman.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to keep traveling timelines to find his own. But that's going to be off screen. We're not going to see that. But it could easily be mentioned. That's one way.
Yeah, it could be.
And Aquaman 2, you can now say it was a completely different timeline.
But unless it has to be said in the movie. You can't just headcanon that. That is extremely bad. It has to happen in the movie. It could be an end credit scene, but it has to happen in the movie. We cannot headcanon that. That is fucking terrible. For James Gunn to say he wants to tell this epic, crazy story, that's a fucking terrible way to start off. I'm a James Gunn supporter, but that's just bad. That's just bad. It is, and I have stuck to my guns on this from day one. I fucking hate when directors say things after the fact. If it doesn't happen in the movie, it doesn't count. It's kind of how I treat the Batman comics too. If it doesn't happen in the main title, I can say it doesn't count because everything's kind of all over the fucking place. But what happens in the main title is what matters. So I am not very happy with Gunn here at the moment, and I hope he clarifies this because I'm excited for what he's going to do. I mean, I loved Guardians 3. I thought that was a dope film. I like that he thinks Spider-Verse is fucking fantastic because that gives me hope about the animated stuff. I like everything that he's doing. What he's saying right now is extremely confusing because he gave us a video. We praised that Slate video. We were like, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. But if you're now going to come out and say that the 4 movies that you said were going to be a part. Now, granted, Shazam doesn't matter because the Flash reset the universe, right? So Shazam doesn't fucking matter. But starting at the Flash universe, this is the new thing. This is the new thing. If you want to do Aquaman and then at the end Flash like fucking zooms into it, it's like, is this my universe? What's happened here? If he wants to do something like that, then I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll buy it. He's running through time. I just don't see how you make sense of this. At the moment, George Clooney is Batman. That is what is happening. Now, here's the thing. James Gunn said George Clooney isn't Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So is he lying? Is he telling the truth? Did he lie to save the surprise?
I think he lied. He lied and he didn't lie. Here's how he lied. He lied in the sense of saying that George Clooney was not in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the specific question that was asked to him on Twitter was not, hey, is George Clooney in this movie?
Yeah.
Everybody asked him, hey, is George Clooney the new Batman?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are connecting the dots the same way that Grace Randolph connected the dots, saying, hey, this is the new Batman of the DCU. Because, of course, this is the new timeline. Again, Jason Momoa was filming Aquaman at the exact same time as Flash was filming this, which is why they were able to have that cameo.
Mm-hmm.
The exact same thing can happen on the opposite end of the spectrum in Aquaman 2. That cameo that you just said, at the end, Flash can come in asking if this is his timeline, like what's going on. That could happen. Am I going to say that it's going to happen? No, because I don't know. But I am confident in saying I do not think that George Clooney is the new Batman of the DCU.
I could believe that 100%. What I'm saying right now, though, is the story says George Clooney is the Batman of this universe. Until we get something that shows us otherwise, it doesn't make sense story-wise.
Yeah.
And I'm the person that I got so much shit about talking shit about the Flash show for so long because it didn't make sense until they made it make sense like 6 seasons later or whatever it was. So, yeah, that's the only thing I have an issue with the movie. Like, I understand it was a cheeky cameo, right? It's a cheeky cameo. It's fun. Yeah. It's cool. People in the audience loved it, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't help when you say that this was the start of your universe. Because all James Gunn had to do was say, like, if you wanted to avoid this, just say our universe starts with Creature Commandos or that it starts with Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
They could have pushed Aquaman and Blue Beetle separated the movies. They could have done that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they wanted to keep this release schedule that it was currently on. You could have flopped them. It's not like DC doesn't flop movies all the time anyways. And you could have just said, we start with Blue Beetle.
I don't even know that I can confidently say that Aquaman is picture ready.
Yeah, currently. I don't know. Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, they haven't even really dropped a trailer yet, and we're 6 months out.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I don't know, man. Again, I like the cameo. It was funny, but not when you're trying to tell me you're building a new universe, because it doesn't make sense. Like, I thought something like had Flash. You know what would have been better is because at the end credit scene, we're dealing with a drunk Jason Momoa who falls into water, and he's like, "Oh, bring me more beer, give me more beer," and that was funny. Loved the end credit scene. Barry should have been just like, "This isn't my timeline," and just fucking runs and disappears. That would have been great. Yeah. That could have solved everything. And then he could have like zoop zoop. Unless there's going to be something in Blue Beetle that kind of clarifies shit. I don't know.
That can be something too.
But from my understanding, I kind of feel like they said Blue Beetle was like on its own.
They had said that it didn't
affect the universe at all.
I am pretty sure that we as fans have assumed that this is going to be enough of an origin story that it's probably like not affected by anything that changes. Yeah. That's what we have said as fans. We don't know that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And George Lopez said that Batman is in the movie. You said that, oh, I doubt that. We said, oh, it's probably in like a newscast or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that can show us who the Batman is too. Like if we see George Clooney Batman on the TV screen, we're like, okay, that's the new Batman.
Yeah, that would be insane. George Clooney's like what, 60 something now? Right?
I think he's
granted. Michael Keaton looked fantastic. So yeah, I don't. That would be. Oh my god, dude! If they go with that,
62.
Yeah, Michael Keaton's what, 68. Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do, man. I want to say like the cameo was great. I didn't need that now because it adds so much confusion.
71
is Clooney?
No, is Keaton. He's 71 years old.
Damn. They filmed this video like what, 5 years ago? It feels like. So yeah, I don't know, man. I think James Gunn needs to clear this up, in my opinion. And it's funny to harken back to what Raphael said a long time, listener of the show. Raphael said he didn't like that James Gunn was saying a lot of this stuff back in the day. He was like, he's not being transparent enough, or he says, I don't want to misquote him, but essentially he didn't really like that Gunn was saying a lot. Yeah. And maybe it's gotten to a point where now I agree with him, because he's made it way more confusing, especially after I've seen The Flash. And I'm not alone in this, because I will say I took a little offense that you were like, you're looking at it the way Grace Randolph did it, because that's just an insult in my opinion. But it's the way the story is told, unfortunately. Yeah. So I'm looking at it in that sense. So it needs to be cleared up. I think the movie's solid. And I think hopefully Gunn will talk about it after the movie's been out for a while, because obviously he's not going to spoil anything, right? But yeah, I don't know. I think what he said in that podcast is very confusing. Because what if something cool happens in Blue Beetle, it's not official, it's not a part of the universe. Like he's adding so much confusion to the universe, when he could have just been like, look guys, he needs to come out and be like, all right, I fucked up or whatever, and be like, the universe and when everything matters starts with Creature Commandos. Just come out and say that. Like, everything that will matter, everything that's connected is Creature Commandos. But Blue Beetle, Flash, Ezra Miller, aka Aquaman, whatever, they will be in the DCU. Just come on and clarify it. And then just, that sucks, because then it's going to be like, oh, then so we don't need to watch the other two movies. Be like, no, they're still going to be. And I think if you say like, Momoa is going to continue to be Aquaman and stuff, that gives people to go watch Aquaman, because like, oh, he's still going to be Aquaman in the future. You know what I mean? And so it is what it is. But I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up, because I think that would have been a huge talking point for the podcast anyways. It just happened this morning. And we've kind of already seen The Flash, so we can definitely talk about that. But overall, I don't know. The movie was solid. I'm very curious on where we're going to go with this. I will say, I think Ezra Miller stays on as Flash, though. I don't think he gets recast because he also just shit on that idea. He's always the same.
Again, this is for me. I think anything right now is a possibility. I think that it may take some mental gymnastics, but this movie can be the ending of a universe, and creating a new one or starting a new timeline or whatever you want to call it. I will see because as of last night or early this morning, Rotten Tomatoes is giving this, as far as audience score, 98%.
Yeah.
People are loving this movie so far.
Mm-hmm.
Critics are calling it average, which is still a good thing for a DC movie. So I think this is going to go over well. Currently, right now, it's projected to only make 70 million this weekend. Some people are hoping to crack 100. I'm not entirely sure how that will go.
I don't know if it was true or not, but I saw that it was tracking better than the Batman in China. I don't know if that was factual or not, though.
I haven't seen that, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. So yeah, at the moment right now, audience score is a 95. So it was as high as a 98. It's a 95 right now. Tomato meter is at 71. So that's kind of not bad. I think a lot of superhero movies lately have been getting like shit tomato meters, and the audience scores have been great. So it all depends on what you want to go off of. Spider-Verse. I mean, yeah, damn. Spider-Verse is a 96 tomato meter and 95 audience score. So that's pretty fantastic for them. But yeah, so that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is everything we got. Everything will be timestamped, of course. I mean, if you're listening to this part of the podcast at this point, you've kind of heard everything. But let us know what you thought of the movie in the comment section. So yeah, that's going to be it. Clay, you got anything going on this week, man?
This upcoming week is the return of Star Wars Alliance, so be on the lookout for that. We have a lot of news, a lot of shifts in the Disney movie slate, everything being moved to 2025, 2026, and 2027. They announced the new dates for Avatar being 2025, 2029, and 2031, which is absolutely wild.
God, well, what's his name even be alive? Isn't he like 80 something?
I don't know how old James Cameron is. But yeah, it's absolutely wild. There's tracking 2 Star Wars movies to be coming out in the same year in 2026. So we'll be discussing that. So yeah, just keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah. Wait, what? I don't want to spoil this. I don't know if this happened. I'm just reading a headline. So spoilers, if you care about Transformers, turn off the podcast right now. I don't know if this happens. I don't think you'll really care about this. Transformers Rise of the Beast director didn't ask permission for G.I. Joe crossover.
There was I haven't heard anything, but there was talks of that happening, and there's actually a comic coming out this week that does that as well.
Oh, really? They need to spice something up with that. I mean, at least bring in, I think Fast and the Furious, and that is just the more logical sense. But yeah, pretty weird. Oh, you couldn't even I mean, if they're going to do G.I. Joe, the older movie that happened before, I think a lot of those people are not really relevant much nowadays. Bruce Willis doesn't even act anymore.
So. Oh, actually, they did. There was conversations, like I think like 2 weeks ago, saying that a G.I. Joe Transformers movie was actually in the works.
That's weird. Are they owned by the same company? Hasbro, right?
Hasbro, yes. And I believe both are owned by Paramount.
Interesting. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is the review. This more than likely comes out on a Thursday. I think we're releasing this late Thursday. So I will have a live stream on Friday. Come by and hang out with that if you want to come hang out. I am planning out live streams more nowadays. I don't know what I have on for this Friday. I think this Friday might be some more Final Fantasy VII. But that is going to be it, ladies and gentlemen. As always, he is Fanboy Clay. I am Juice Wayne. And remember, Batman is awesome. Batman.